Welcome all to the May 7th legislative meeting for the School District of Upper Dublin. I'd like to welcome the community. Thank you for coming tonight, and some of our students are here tonight, and we have some recognitions. Those individuals representing the awards, thank you for joining us tonight. And we would like to start the meeting. Tonight is our students' last night. I keep forgetting it's either Frederick, Charles, and his new name is Roger from Rent. Frederick had one of the leads in Rent and did an amazing job, and it's a show that I've learned to really appreciate the show Rent. I've watched it many, many times, so I can compare Frederick's performance to the leads on Broadway, and he did an amazing job. So I'd like to ask everybody to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and Frederick will lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, I'll ask for a roll call. Ms. Evans?
Dr. Ludwig. Mr. Sirota.
Here.
Mrs. Rothman.
Here.
Mrs. Good.
Here.
Dr. Kim.
Here.
Congratulations on your Doctor of Ministry.
Congratulations. The whole board, congratulations. Dr. Kim?
Mr. Shimaleski. Mrs. Hester.
Here.
Dr. Resnick.
Here.
Dr. Levinowitz.
Here.
All present.
All present and accounted for. I don't know about that, but we're all here. Okay. Again, I'd like to welcome everybody, and since we have a lengthy agenda, I'd like to just move right through and ask Mr. Griffin for his final report, and then introduce our new student government representative.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for all of the support that I received in this position, and I just wanted to extend my sincerest thanks to the board and everybody on it for giving me a great time in this position. So I'm going to pass the torch tonight to Mr. Ben Helsner. He's a rising junior at Upper Dublin, and he's taking over my position next year. Here's his report.
Thank you, Charlie and Dr. Levinowitz. I'm Ben Helsner, and I'm proud to be standing here succeeding Charlie as our Student Government School Board representative. Our new steering committee has hit the ground running, with rising sophomore underclassman advisor Woo Sol Jun. We also have rising juniors like Secretary Talia Kepnes, Info and Communications Chair Arden Solomon, School Improvements Chair Nathan Russick, Spirit Chair Lauren Taylor, and Vice President Eden Astorino. Finally, we have rising seniors such as Treasurer Luke Piccini, Policies and Procedures Chair Bryn Demirs, Community Service Chair Sam Kaplan, Activities Chair Ashley Kunkel, and of course, our President Angelina Hahn. The student government is currently working hard to execute another successful Kiss a Senior Goodbye program, which allows our students to gift their graduating friends a piece of candy to help bring the sweetness out in such a bittersweet time of their lives. In other news, the Upper Dublin track team is excitedly preparing to participate in leagues this Friday and Saturday, coming off of their participation in Penn Relays. The recent spring concert had great performances made by the band, orchestra, and choir, and with senior prom closing in fast, many students are waiting with bated breath. As the new school board representative, I'm looking forward to representing the student government for the 2017-2018 school year. Thank you.
And welcome aboard. We look forward to hearing your monthly reports. Okay. Moving on now to the superintendent's report, Dr. Wheeler.
Thank you. I think so. Okay, a bit of a stretch, but we'll make it. As we open the meeting, I would like to take a moment to speak to a topic on which we have recently received a great deal of feedback from our community. There have been concerns shared about the development of the elementary school schedule, and particularly the question of how instructional time will be allotted in the various grade levels, and the question of how recess will fit into a revised schedule. Factored into this is another expressed concern that the board and our administration does not listen to our constituents. I can assure you that we do. We listen to all of our stakeholders, recognizing that frequently we receive varied and sometimes conflicting feedback. An example of how this affects our work is the concern recently shared by some members of our community about our district performance on mandated standardized tests. These tests were originally designed to inform the educator evaluation process, but we all know that these results are also used to rate and rank schools and districts. And while our achievement scores for the most part meet our expectations, Upper Dublin continues to struggle in raising the growth score for a group of students officially described as historically underperforming. In our case, it is our students who are economically disadvantaged, and as you know, that has kept us from being ranked by U.S. News for the past 2 years. Some members of our community emphatically express their concern about this and their perspective that property values are being compromised and that we must act quickly and decisively to redesign our educational program to address this concern. And the board and our administrators are listening, and we do hear and respect this point of view. At the same time, other members of our community have just as strenuously shared their perspective that test scores should not be given such priority, and that our continuous improvement decisions should not be made with an overemphasis on actions designed to improve test scores, asserting that we must prioritize our efforts on providing a child-friendly educational environment that addresses the social, emotional, and physical well-being of all of our students in addition to academic achievement. And the board and our administrators are listening, and we do hear and respect this perspective as well. One area of consideration in this process has been the question of how recess will fit into a revised schedule. We have heard from parents who advocate strongly to include a dedicated second recess time throughout the elementary grades, and their input is being examined by our scheduling work group. The district is committed to providing at least 25 minutes of guaranteed recess per day for every student every day, and the work group is currently considering increases to lunchtime and the role of a scheduled or discretionary second recess at each grade level. Of importance to our administration is the flexibility for our teachers to use their professional judgment to provide optimal movement and brain breaks for our students throughout the day. No decision has yet been made. No recommendation has yet been developed. We continue to review the feedback that we are receiving. The work of this group continues, and we anticipate a presentation of this work during upcoming Education Committee and legislative meetings. As the school year draws to a close, I wish to draw attention to several important dates. Our Upper Dublin High School class of 2017 will graduate on June 12th with a rain date of June 13th, although we know we're not going to need the rain date. Fingers are crossed. Promotion ceremonies for Sandy Run, Jaredtown, and Maple Glen will be held on June 15th, and for Thomas Fitzwater and Fort Washington on June 16th. The schools are seeking members of the board to speak during these promotion activities. Speak to Art, please, if you are interested. Our last day of school will be June 16th. Please check the district website calendar for specific information for each school's end-of-year activities. Finally, the board is aware that for the past year, I have participated with about 100 other Pennsylvania superintendents in Education Secretary Rivera's Superintendent's Academy. Our task for this 2-year commitment is to support the Secretary's Poverty and Student Achievement Initiative. The focus during year 1 has been to establish structures and supports for ensuring equitable access to quality educators for all students across the Commonwealth. We have benchmarked best instructional practices with those from the top international educational systems and most of the most successful states in the United States. I have been working specifically with two other Montgomery County superintendents in the academy, Alexis McGloin from Upper Perkiomen and Jim Crisfield from Wissahickon, to develop a project proposal that will provide better trained candidates for principalships throughout the county. I brought information from our mid-program colloquium for your review. We have now begun our second year of work, and I will keep the board updated as we move forward with this important task. And I thank you for your support of my participation in the Academy, which is proving to be a worthwhile endeavor and tremendous professional development. The information that I am bringing back to Upper Dublin is informing our district-level decision-making. And in the booklet, if you look at page 37, it outlines the project that Superintendents McGloin and Crisfield and I are working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wheeler. At this point, I'd like to invite up to the podium the proud principal of Upper Dublin High School, Mr. Bob Schultz, for a number of student recognition awards.
Thank you very much. And good evening, and thank you all for this opportunity to give tribute to the excellence of our students in the area of academics. We have two special awards which will be presented, and then I will provide an overview of the types of honors that have been earned this year by a large number of our outstanding scholars. The Coca-Cola Scholars Foundation has recognized an Upper Dublin student as a recipient of one of the country's most outstanding high school leaders. We are very pleased to present a certificate and an award to this student, for outstanding leadership, community involvement, and academic achievement. Would you please join me in recognizing, as she walks to the podium, Miss Alexis Schneider. So Alexis is one of 150 scholars from a national applicant pool of over 100,000. She will receive a college scholarship and join a family of alumni, and in the Schneider family case, family is literal, family of alumni who are leading positive change in their communities and around the world. Alexis recently attended the 2017 Scholars Weekend and was honored at the 29th Annual Scholars Banquet. There she participated in a Leadership Development Institute, an intensive leadership training that challenges students to develop an inside-out leadership philosophy. In recognition, she will receive As an award winner, Alexis was given the right to name an Educator of Distinction. For her excellence in instruction in the area of biology, this wonderful teacher is receiving the Joseph B. Whitehead Educator of Distinction Award for exemplary education to the field of education. It is now my privilege to welcome Mrs. Megan Gallagher. We'll have these two young ladies come up and shake the hands of the administration and board. For the second individual award tonight, I am going to introduce Ms. Christina Gall and Mr. Alex Hunt from AXA Advisors. They will now join me at the podium to present an AXA Achievement Scholarship Award to Dustin Zhang. At this time, Dustin, would you please also join us at the podium? And ladies and gentlemen, would you please recognize Dustin for this awesome achievement?
AXA prides itself on the commitment to education and helping people reach their financial goals. The AXA Foundation directs AXA's philanthropic and volunteer activities. Through philanthropy, volunteerism, and sustainability, AXA leverages our resources and risk expertise to build a stronger society for our customers and our employees. Our signature program within the foundation is AXA Achievement. AXA Achievement helps students and parents take the next step toward college and educators take the next step toward success. The AXA Achievement Scholarship provides over $1.4 million in scholarships to young people throughout the United States and Puerto Rico. Students have the opportunity to receive a $2,500, $10,000, or $25,000 scholarship. In addition, any student who wins a scholarship, a grant is made to their school in the amount of $1,000. I'd like to congratulate Dustin on an amazing achievement and all of the work he's done inside and outside the classroom. It's a true honor. It's yours. Take it home with you, do what you gotta do.
Dustin, that's a big check, Dustin. That's a big check. So just a couple of comments. I was fortunate enough to know Lexi, I guess, since middle school, and very easy for us to predict the success that she would have moving from middle school to high school. And Dustin, I did get to know at the high school, and they are both finalists for the medal for the Upper Dublin that we will be the event that we'll be having on May 17th, I believe, the Upper Dublin Medals. May 17th, they will both hopefully be attending to join us in the special evening where we recognize excellence. Congratulations. Mr. Schultz.
So over the course of the 16-17 school year, literally hundreds of Upper Dublin High School students have entered academic competitions, performing admirably, achieving honors, and winning awards. I would now like to give the board and the community a very brief summary of some of the highlights of the academic excellence that's been demonstrated. In the area of allied and performing arts, we had national recognition in the Council for Economics Education, Future Business Leaders of America, and the National Economics Challenge. Our artists were recognized at the PSEA Art Show, the Greenfield Youth Film Festival, the Wharton Esherick Museum, and the Bazemore Gallery. We had over 20 students perform in county, district, and regional orchestra, chorus, and band events, and 3 were selected to all-state positions. 46 students attended the State Thespian Festival, with 6 receiving scholarships or qualifying for the International Conference in June. Our 3 successful theatric performances entertained thousands from the community, and Upper Dublin students received 7 Cappy Award nominations for their efforts in the spring show, Rent. In the area of language arts, a student won the Philadelphia Young Playwriting Monologue Competition, and her original work was produced and performed at the Drake Theater. 2 students won gold medals for their submissions to the National Scholastic Arts and Writing Competition. 20 Upper Dublin High School students qualified for the PJAS Science Fair next weekend at Penn State University. 2 will receive Perseverance Awards, while another has earned the right to compete in the upcoming International Science and Engineering Fair. One of our environmental science classes is a finalist in the Unless contest at the Philadelphia Zoo, and they will exhibit their products on Thursday of this week, hopefully hearing their names announced as winners. The World Language Department enjoyed another successful year at both the local and national levels. Our students received 28 awards in French, 18 awards in German, 37 awards in Spanish, and over 80 awards in Latin in a variety of competitions. While a large number of our students participated in introductory mathematics competitions, 6 qualified for the American International Mathematics Exam, and 1 participated in the grueling 9-hour USA Mathematical Olympiad. We have also once again had great performances by both our robotics and by our math teams. While not specific academic awards, we again have had numerous students recognized for character, for leadership, and for service. So in addition to the biannual SHINE Awards, Upper Dublin students have been named by the Rotary Club, Widener University, KYW News Studies, Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership, Team Giving, and Prudential Spirit. It continues to be my distinct honor to serve at Upper Dublin High School, and I thank the board and the administration, as well as the community, for allowing me to give this summary on behalf of the entire high school staff. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. And I do know that in early June we will be honoring our seniors at awards night, and the community is invited, and I know there'll be some board members attending that very, very special evening. Thank you, sir. Okay, we have one additional presentation tonight, which will be the by Ms. Bray on the proposed final budget. Tonight in Finance, you'll see a motion that the board will take to approve a proposed final budget. We will have discussion after Ms. Bray's presentation, and then when we get to the agenda items, I've asked our Finance Committee Chair to move up the item on the approval of the preliminary final budget, so we can do that early in the evening to see what increase the board is recommending for the proposed final budget. Ms. Bray?
Thank you very much. This is, I think, the 17th budget presentation between finance and board meetings that we've had so far for the 17-18 budget, and it is coming to a close. And tonight, there are certainly some slides I'm not going to go through in detail because we've all seen them a number of times, but there are certainly some things that I do need to hit very carefully. Just want to remind everybody in the audience that this year the board approved a resolution in January saying that they would not go above the index, which is 2.5%. As Dr. Levinowitz already announced, we'll have some discussion at the end of this presentation about what the proposed final budget increase will reflect. Fast forward to May. There's something called property tax reduction allocation, and that was approved on May 1st. And so we were able to work that information into our presentation tonight. Property tax reduction allocation came about because of Act 1 in 2006. And we'll see more later on. Again, there is one more vote, at least one more presentation, probably 2, and for the board to approve the final budget on June 14th, 2017. This is a slide from as of April the 3rd, essentially projecting our ending fund balance as of June 30th, 2017 to be about $5.8 million uncommitted. There's an additional $2 million of committed funds set aside for insurance increases as well as assessment appeals of about $1 million. Looking ahead, 2017-18 estimated fund balance was projected at $2.3 million. That will be changing due to some good guys and some news that we've learned since that time. just want to remind everybody that if revenues decrease, the fund balance decreases. If revenues increase, fund balance increases, and the inverse is true for expenditures. So, we've had very good luck with real estate transfer taxes during the year. We've had some large properties down in the Fort Washington Office Park change hands, generating a very positive cash flow. You're going to notice that $436,000 figure again a bit later because we have plans for it. Also, donations. We needed to increase that number by $42,000 due to the generosity of the PTA at Jarretttown. That was their donation or support of playground equipment. So there's total revenue adjustments since last month of $478,600. These are basically changes within the classifications that are required for accounting. Board services, we're going to be upgrading. It was approved last month, the technology in this room. And so that's an in and out. It's money within the current year budget, but it's coming from a different area. Then it will be spent. Transfer to capital projects. That's the same $436,600 of real estate transfer taxes. That's going to be transferred to capital projects to be used on repairing our buildings or perhaps in conjunction with a future project at Sandy Run Middle School. And transfers also to capital reserve of the $250,000 that normally is put aside for budgetary reserve. So at the end of June 30th this year, and really only about 7 weeks, we're estimating $5.9 million. We have to carry forward that $42,000 to look at 17-18 and real estate property tax. You will notice relief. That is, we are getting $66,000 more money from the Commonwealth than we budgeted through property tax relief allocation. So we have more money coming in from the state. That's that 7,000 number, and less money needed on the local end. So that's a zero sum. Transfer taxes, we're increasing that line item about $250,000 for next year. Payment in lieu of taxes, $74,100, has to do with the Madison estate and the changes that are going on there. It's positive. We have a slight change in our PSERS and FICA subsidy of $20,000, which has to do with 2 retirements, which is what we currently have. We factored in 2 retirements of our professional staff. So next year, our estimated fund balance at this time has gone up to be $2.8 million. But don't forget that we have approximately $2 million of committed fund balance as well. So estimated fund balance, just repeating myself, June 30th, 2017, putting everything together, showing the total revenue estimated at this point in time for the year, total expenditures, including adjustments. But you might want to focus on that transfer amount of $2.6 million that's going into capital reserve for the year. Again, leaving 5.9 at the end of this year. And using the totals for next year, almost $96 million in total revenue. Total expenditures of $97 million, with $1.7 million currently being budgeted to be transferred to capital projects for next year, leaving 2.8 again. I did speak of the property tax reduction that was afforded or came into being in 2006, Act 1. So this is just a summary. You'll note that the amount of money that we initially budgeted, what we received for last year, was $2,381,000. As I indicated, it increased by $66,000 to $2,449,000. In addition, we had a few fewer parcels that were approved for property tax reduction. We decreased from 7,300 down to 7,281. Hence, the amount of money, the reduction of the approved properties has increased from $325 to $336 for 17-18. We probably don't have fewer residences. Everyone needs to apply when they buy a home. So when the homes turn over, that is when that real estate transfer tax occurs, people need to fill out a form. And those forms are sent to all the homes every year as required. We do have some things to consider. We've had some negative experience in our consortium this year. And although we started out the year 2017 or 16-17 with about $333,000 in the trust for Bucksmont Healthcare Consortium, it's estimated that we're going to end the year, again in about 7 weeks, in the red, a deficit of $595,429. We're going to have to decide how we want to fund that, because it will be required that we make that whole, and we're going to have to make an adjustment to our budget for this year, and we'll discuss this in more depth on May 18th at our next Finance Committee. There is also a trustee meeting that day that Mr. Sigafus will be attending, and maybe there'll be some changes, but we're not expecting anything material at this point in time. The villa. The villa stopped operations nearly a year ago, but as most people in the audience and certainly the board members know, we've continued to have financial dealings with the School District of Philadelphia, the Commonwealth, as well as the school itself in trying to wrap things up. This year we've paid out some additional tuition to Philadelphia, but this year we've also received some money that we had fronted or paid in previous years. So we're trying to wrap that up in 17-18, or excuse me, in 16-17 by June 30th of this year. And next year we will have actually a little less revenue than what we had this year due to tuition. In other words, we're just about to finish, but because of the lag, next year will be impacted, revenues will be. Delinquent real estate taxes. Of course, I monitor taxes and revenues and expenditures. Ms. Baldessano and I do every month. And we're noticing that there's a trend, a lag in our delinquent real estate taxes. And that amount has been about $1 million for the last 3 years. So we're going to be taking a look at that and see if we can get some answers. That may need to be adjusted in the final budget. Additional retirements. There may be a few more of those. We're not certain. At this time, Mr. Sigafus has 2 signed letters, and that's all that's factored into the budget. I know I've been talking, I think since January or so, about a new transportation formula for the subsidy that perhaps it would be reduced. We've heard as much as 10%, which would be $50,000 to $55,000. But even as of this date, I've heard nothing about how to make a calculation, or if we should, in fact, reduce our revenues by that amount of money. We'll continue to look for a PSBA as well as PASBO for updates as to what we might want to do, and of course, the state. And confirm our 2017-18 Commonwealth funding, both in basic ed funding as well as special ed funding, in light of the projected $3 billion, yes, that's with a B, at the Commonwealth level. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about some of the incentives that the Commonwealth is taking to try to collect their own past taxes and late revenues. And this is a little troubling to the business administrators. Will we actually get the funding that we've been promised, even for this year, as well as 2017-18? There'll be an assessment change. Every month there is one, but we will look to see if that's significant for 2017-18. And then status of assessment appeals. We've got a few positive things that might be coming in and would impact this year or perhaps next year. So those are the things to consider. That's kind of a early agenda for the May 18th meeting, Finance Committee meeting. And with that, what Dr. Levinowitz brought up earlier, there's been a lot of discussion. You'll notice at the top of this slide where we were on January 9th as far as revenue based on a 2.5% real estate tax increase. You'll notice that we made the adjustment for the $66,000 that I've talked about several times as far as a real estate property tax reallocation reduction. And so we've calculated out the tax increases, or the differences maybe I should say, based on a 2.39% tax increase, 2.29, 2.19, and 2.09. And obviously, off to the right-hand side, although it is cut off, you will note that the amounts are cumulative as we go down. So approximately 0.1% is equal to around $70,000 in Upper Dublin for the year 2017-18.
Okay, before we discuss what's on the projection now, are there any questions regarding Ms. Bray's presentation from the board? Any questions on the budget presentation? Okay. Seeing none, I'd like to open up for the board to discuss the just discuss the potential tax increase for next year. Right now, we're at 2.5. If there's any board members who would like to discuss the potential of bringing down that increase below the 2.5. We have seen some numbers of potential budgets from our neighboring districts that I find interesting. That there are some districts who are taking the full 2.5 and also looking at exceptions. So again, we didn't take any exceptions this year, and we're at 2.5. But right now, Dr. Resnick, since you're the chair of finance, I'm going to turn it over to you to lead the discussion.
Okay.
Not saying you need to go first, but if there's anybody else that would like to comment.
Okay. Well, I would start off by saying that last year I argued for a lower tax rate than we settled on, and looking retrospectively, I think we could have afforded that lower tax rate, and that higher tax rate that we settled on is in the budget every year going forward. So I think that the community has made substantial sacrifice in terms of tax increases over the last 10 years or so. I've been on the board 11 years. I've been party to many of those, basically all those increases, and have felt that they, even though they were significant, they were necessary. But last year, I felt that we were in a much better position to start a trend in the opposite direction. The board did agree to a lesser number than the maximum last year, and we're kind of in a similar situation this year where I feel that we can produce the programs that we plan on giving our students. We are in much better financial shape than we have been in recent years. I think that talking about tenths of a % decrease is more symbolic than it is even impactful. But I think that symbolic appearance is necessary, and I think the time has come for the board to move off of that maximum potential and show the community that we are in better financial stead than we have been, and that we have to look at where we stand in terms of other communities, and even though we set ourselves apart, and I think we have good reason to do that in terms of our educational product, but we have to come to grips with certain perspectives that are in the community and outside the community, and as I think that we should reduce the 2.5 comfortably to a level at 2.19. That would be my number, that I think reducing the budget by $217,000 would be quite affordable, yet, symbolically a very good gesture for the future.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Resnick. Just to give the community a little bit better perspective of where we have been with taxes, last year, just to remind you, because it's hard for us to remember, last year our increase was 2.79, and we did take a PSERS exception. The Act 1 index was 2.4. This year it's 2.5. Last year we took a 0.39 exception. The tax increase was 279. I can go back many years. Let me just go back a couple of years to give you perspective. 279 last year, the year before 2.84. The Act 1 was only a 1.9. We took a significant PSERS exception. So 279, 284 the year before, total tax increase 3%. We took significant PSERS exception. Year before that was 3.01, and the year before that was 4.25. Before that, 4.32. So over the past 6 years, 432, 425, 301, 3, 284, 279, always taking a part of the exception. And we argued, I think correctly, that those exceptions mostly are the costs that we cannot control, which is PSERS, the cost of PSERS. So we took those exceptions. This is the first year we're not taking any exceptions for a number of years. We did not take an exception back in 11-12.
Just wanted to point out that last year we could have gone higher. We didn't take the full amount of the exception for PSERS last year. I
Right.
believe it was 3.29 would have been the maximum.
Maximum, yeah, and I'm not sure if we took the maximums in every year prior to that. I don't have that information down. So I just wanted to provide that, that understanding, and then we're going to let the discussion continue. If there's any board members that would like to speak. Joe, Mr. Chmielewski.
I applaud the intent of the board to try to continue to have a lower tax increase each year. We are miles ahead of where we were just a few years ago as far as our financial standing is concerned. This year not taking a exception for PSERS and for special ed, which is the first time we've done that probably since Act 1 began. Bearing in mind that even if we don't take the exception, the costs are still there that have to be borne by the district, so we have to absorb that in some way into our budget. The other thing is that we have a substantial capital project on the horizon in Sandy Run, and we've been putting money aside, which I applaud. I'm a little bit concerned that if the project is of a scope that we don't have enough money in our capital reserve to tackle it, that would be an issue. If you look at, say, at the 2.19 level, $217,000 cumulatively that would not be taxed. If you look at the high school project, $6 million additional debt service yielded a $120 million project, so you're leveraging the money about 20 times, so that 217 is in excess of $4 million that could be used toward a project. So those are the numbers that I'm looking at. If we have a presentation that shows that a capital project of a scope necessary at Sandy Run is something within the realm of possibility under the existing budget that we're looking at, and including a less tax increase in 2.5, I'm all for it. But lacking that information, I just want to take a little bit of pause and understand it. You know, if you don't tax in a given year under Act 1, you can't make up the next year if you understated your tax increase by a certain level. So it's always something we have to consider. It's just part of Act 1 and the way that was structured. Prior to that, if you didn't tax enough in one year, you could always make it up in another. You don't have that possibility, and that's part of the reason why school districts tax at a level to be conservative and make sure that they can handle all of their expenses. It's something I'm concerned about because we do have major capital projects on the horizon.
Thank you, Mr. Chmielewski. Any other comments, statements?
Sure, I'll say something.
Was it, okay, Ms. Rothman.
So I guess some of the concerns I have are the things that we don't know for sure. I think we know that we're going to be paying $600,000 to the consortium. I know we have a rate stabilization fund, which is for that, but at the same time, we're going to need to probably replenish the rate stabilization fund. So regardless, we're going to be looking at $600,000. One of the other concerns, and I know that we aren't certain about what's going to happen with the state this next year. I expect to lose about $50,000 from transportation because that was part of the governor's budget. And I can't imagine that the legislature would increase from what the governor's, since the budget that passed was $800 million less than what the governor had requested initially. Looking at what our fund balance is projected at the end of next year, it's about $2.8 million. I think that we can safely take out $650,000 from that, from just kind of what we know to expect. So, I agree a lot with what Dr. Resnick has said. And I guess one of my major concerns is, we look at our tax increases. We've seen many tax increases over the last, before I lived here. It's been forever. And we don't want to discourage people from moving in. On the other hand, we don't want to have any compromises with our programs. So, I think that we can go below the 2.5%. I'm not sure I'm at 2.2. Or 2.19. I'm probably right closer to 2.3.
239.
229.
239. You mean?
Yes. Well, 229.
229. Okay, I'm sorry. 229. Okay, 2.3.
2.3.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rothman. Any other comments? Okay, Dr. Ludwig.
We've talked a little bit about some of the costs that are coming up in the next year, the things we can anticipate. One of my first concerns is I don't want to go low enough that we end up having to cut anything that we have now. I think we have to plan ahead for the project at Sandy Run. There's other things to plan ahead for, which are one of the things that we discussed a little bit this year and decided to postpone, which is instructional support specialists at the elementary school. That's something that I think we should really aim to be able to do. So where should we go? The one thing that I think is in our favor in terms of planning for the future is the new real estate developments. The Regency, which is already in progress, the Promenade, which most of the approvals, there's still more in the approval chain to happen, but these are things that are going to bring additional revenue into the district, and because of that, and I think that we need to, although we've already agreed not to go above the Act 1 index, I think we can go a little bit lower and put some of that money back into the community in the form of a little bit lower tax increase. So I would be at the 2.29 level. I really wouldn't want to go below that.
Okay. Other? Okay, I don't see anyone else. Okay. Okay, Ms. Hester.
I'm also concerned about the effect of increased taxes on the community and how it affects people who want to move to the school district. But I also agree with Dr. Resnick that we need to try, or at least attempt to go into a different direction. So at this point, I would also be in agreement with a lower tax rate, and I would probably be more inclined to go with the 2.29 as well.
2 point what, Ms. Hester? 2.9. Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll take a step. I think
Dr. Kim.
I think much of what has been said I agree with in terms of on both sides. I think stewarding the resources that we have as with the taxpayers is difficult to do. We see the swings that can happen in each year that are pretty significant, and so I think it's really difficult to even gauge what might come next year. I do think that the prognosis of income with some of the debt fallout, the bond refinancing that we've done throughout the year, and there are some significant things on the horizon that do seem to favor an opportunity for us to not necessarily have it at the 2.5, and so I would be in favor of 2.29 as well.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Sirota.
I want to remind everyone that, so Act 1 has been rising since 2011 roughly. There was a minor dip in 2015. But it's been rising steadily, and that's a reflection of employment costs primarily. So 2.5% is the highest it's been since 2010. And so our costs are rising. We have to cover those. And while it's not necessarily the case that our employment costs rise by exactly that percentage, to look at the trend shows that employment costs are rising. Most of the neighboring districts, many of the neighboring districts have been towing the Act 1 line for quite some time, and so their tax increases are on an upward trend as well because Act 1 is on an upward trend. Our tax increases have been on a downward trend, and certainly I do want to continue that. In the context of Act 1, in the context of history, of our recent history, and in the context of our upcoming expenses, it seems to me at 2.5%, we've already come down quite a bit from where we've been in the past. We didn't take any exceptions. We're more than 0.5%. Yeah, at that point, we're roughly 0.5% below our maximum, which is more than we have been for most of the past years. So we have stated a commitment, well, Dr. Levinowitz has stated a commitment to try to keep the tax increase percentage decreasing every year. If we go too low, it's hard to continue that trend. So I just, if that's a commitment, a longer-term commitment, we need to be careful not to go too low. As Mr. Chmielewski said, we can't make it up in future years. So I'm a little nervous, given the uncertainties, to go too low. I certainly agree that getting underneath the Act 1 index is a good, strong goal, and I'd really like to see us under the Act 1 index. I think that puts us in a really good context with comparison to neighboring districts that shows that we are sensitive to the value issue of the program we provide. There's two sides to value. There's having a strong program that attracts the kinds of families we want to attract, and there's having a low tax increase that attracts people as well. So if we go too low, it becomes a lot harder to provide the sorts of programs we're talking about. As Dr. Ludwig said, one of the more expensive things we've talked about is additional positions at the elementary school for instructional support specialists. Positions are always the most expensive thing we could do, or among the most expensive things we could do. Facilities are pretty expensive too. So I'm nervous about going even as low as 2.29. I feel like we've gone down from where we could be quite a bit. If we look at past years, 2.5 is already a significant drop from where we were. I would have been at more like 2.4 or something. I would like to get under the Act 1 index, and I'm surprised to find myself at the high end of the board. But I think that's where I am. I'm actually quite surprised by the discussion so far.
Ms. Good.
I happen to empathize with the community a lot as well. I agree with Dr. Resnick on just about everything that he had to say. I would like to see us go under 2.5. I'd like to see us go under 2.29. Splitting the difference, I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense, but 2.25 sounds reasonable to me. I certainly wouldn't go over 2.29.
Okay, I think that covers all the board members except me. I get to speak last. There are charts that anyone can get from Montgomery County, which lists school millage, municipality millage, county millage, and then the total millage. I have in front of me that information from Montgomery County. There's 20 districts in Montgomery County, 20 districts. And back in 2012, when we compare just the school millage, which is the property taxes, we were 9th in the county. Our millage back then was 28.78. We were 9th, almost the middle. Since then, we moved up 2 notches to 7. Our millage is now 32.29. We're 7th. We're not the highest. You hear our taxes are the highest. Well, our assessed value, our homes are worth more. When you multiply it, when you then take the millage, we pay more taxes. So we do not have the highest millage. 32.29. Cheltenham is 45.09. This is public information, so so I can give you a name of a particular district. Okay, and then there's other districts on this list, but now we're 7th. For me, I would like to see us get back to the middle of the pack. This is one situation where I think we should be in the middle of the pack, not in other situations. I think that we finally have a significant amount of development occurring in Upper Dublin, and I think the message we need to send to those looking at these properties is taxes are high, we realize that, but we are making a conscious attempt to bring them down. When you look at how much possible revenue we can get from these developments, it is significant. If you've been attending the township meetings about the promenade, there's numbers as much as $2 million from the promenade alone. We think that's a little high, but that is a number that's been mentioned probably by them, by BET. So it could be high, but maybe it isn't high. It depends. So again, just I would agree with Dr. Resnick. I'd like to have a 2.19 tax increase. Another thing you need to realize, if you paid attention to the PowerPoint, to the presentation tonight with Ms. Bray, if you looked at the fund balance from April for 17-18 and today's fund balance, it's $500,000 more, $500,000 more. That's good news. But again, we don't know what the medical implications are going to be. That could offset the medical and more. But when we're looking at our numbers, we've within a little over a month, we picked up $500,000 already. $500,000 is half of the 2.9 is the 270. How much money? 270. The last slide, 277,000 or 217, which is not half of 218, which isn't half of the additional fund balance that we have in the preliminary estimates that we're looking at. But we know that there's significant costs, and so my recommendation is that we go to 2.19. I just want to remind the board, I think they know very well, and the community, some of the members in the community know this very well too. There have been districts that have had a 0% increase in a number of years, 0%. So it's not a crazy thing to do. There are some districts, not many, but they've gone 0% because they worked very hard before Act 1 and have a much more significant fund balance. Their savings account is much larger. So they don't need to build up the savings account to look at capital projects, debt service. We still need to do that. But we also want people to come into Upper Dublin, move into Upper Dublin, be it in apartments, be it in single homes or in townhomes. We want them to move in. So that's why I'm at 2.19. Ms. Bray, any closing comments?
Any questions from the board? I'm fine.
No. Any other questions? Anything from the board?
Can I respond to something that you said, or
Sure.
you want to save that for later?
No, you could. Sure.
So regarding our ranking in the county, and of course you really only can compare millage rates within the county because assessments happen at a county level. The next township below us would be Springfield at 32.7. We're at 33.0807. Sorry, we're at 32.29 roughly. They're at 31.66. To get to where they are, if you're trying to improve our ranking, we'd have to have like a 1.3. It's going to take a long time.
We know what they're doing. Depends what they're doing too.
Yeah, they're at 1.7.
Yeah.
No, sorry, that's Cheltenham.
Right.
Yeah, they're at 2.5, I think.
Yeah.
To get us down below, to improve our ranking, if you're just looking at the number of the rank, it's going to take years. And I completely agree. We don't want to be at the top, but I don't feel like our ranking within the county is something to look at year to year. I think we want to have a long-term trend that takes us downward, but I don't want to be picking a number based on trying to get us down because we can't get to, 1.3 this year. I think you'll agree.
No, I think my main point was to show that we're not the highest. We're 7. We're our number 7.
Yeah, and we have been for some time.
Right. But we're not 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah. We're not even close to 1, 2, or 3.
Correct. Correct.
And, right, okay, so I agree with you on that point then. All right.
And Dr. Ludwig?
Just one more comment. I mean, I know that as a person looking for a place to live, the only real number that matters, you look at the quality of the education, you can look at various other things about the community, but what matters in terms of the taxes is what you would have to pay for a specific house. However, when you look at it from the point of view of a school district and a budget, really what matters is the total assessed property value in that school district times the millage. So it's not just the millage, it's the total assessed value. And in some ways you're comparing apples to oranges because some school districts have large industrial parks, they have a lot of commercial real estate, they have more houses, more expensive houses. So it really, to say, okay, we need to get our tax rate, to lower our taxes so we can be competitive with X other district. We can't always do that because unless we cut our programs.
Correct.
So I do think we have to think about our district, what we need, what we project going forward, and do the best we can that way.
Right, and with these additional developments coming online, hopefully, our assessed value will increase.
Can I just correct something I just said? Springfield Township is tentatively at 3.3%. Of course, until they actually pass a proposed final budget, we don't know.
Right, they see us at 2.5, right?
Yeah.
3.3. Right. Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Okay, so we did that. We're not voting. We're going to be voting on that after community input, and that will be the first item in the agenda tonight. So at this point, I believe we are up to community input. And I thought it was important for us to have that discussion. I know many of you are here to discuss, one item, but I wanted you to understand too, the other things that we're dealing with and the tax increases, the potential tax increase. So at this point, we will open up community input. Please state your name and part of the community that you reside in. You are limited to 4 minutes. We will have a second community input at the end, at the conclusion of the meeting. Thank you. Mr. Petrusky.
Yeah, Richard Petrusky for Washington. First of all, I want to commend Dr. Resnick for recommending a lower than the possible tax increase. And I listened to all of these various comments on the tax increase, and I really didn't hear anything there that made a lot of sense. I'd like just to suggest, if you're going to decrease the tax increase, why don't you just settle at 2%? I mean, that's a nice flat number. So why don't you do that instead of all these 2.19s, 2.29s, and all that kind of stuff? That's one question. The other one is that on page 7, there's a comparison of the end-of-year fund balances between 2016, 2017, and 2017, 2018. And I noticed there's a $3.1 million difference in the end-of-year fund balance. And I'd like to know the reason for this, and does this really show that you have less uncommitted money available if something should happen than you had in 2016-17 versus 2017-2018? Because that's a $3.1 million difference, and that's a significant difference. And I thought that you were working towards a higher amount of money in a fund available if you needed it. I think you were looking at 8%. I think that's the number that Mr. Cherwenovitz had recommended. And so I'm really curious as to why this big difference in the amount of money that's uncommitted, and if this is actually a less money committed. So those are my questions. The other thing I'd like to do is I'd like to thank 3 ladies that are here tonight. I was having dinner at a restaurant tonight, and Dr. Wheeler and 2 other ladies came by and said hello to me, and my wife was there, and boy, she was really impressed. So thank you for that.
Did Dr. Wheeler pick up the bill, or? No, okay, good. Just checking. Okay. Ms. Brister, Fort Washington. Maximize your time, Anita.
Haven't moved yet in spite of all those years of high tax increases.
Thank you.
Meaning over the index. Because there's been at least 9 years above the index that I know of. All right, so let me start with the budget. A question, and this I guess would be best to address to Joe Chmielewski. I'm a little confused about, I know that the Sandy Run...
Anita, really, it's just ask don't address it to anybody.
Okay, well, I know that the Sandy Run project isn't well defined yet, but if I'm piecing together what you're saying, I just want to make sure we have enough when we're trying to put money aside. I would just like a ballpark figure. Are you trying to put $80 million aside, enough to borrow $80 million, $100 million? Is that possible to give the community a ballpark figure, even though we know it's not at the definite point yet? I would also like to commend Dr. Resnick. I said this at a previous meeting, you were absent, that last year you said, I thought it was profound, that you were worried we were going to kill the golden goose. And I do think that's a good tale to look at. And to sum it up, paraphrasing you, the way we're killing the golden goose possibly is that we're making Upper Dublin not as desirable. Because as I might have also said this, that I can go back a pretty long way, and problems with different superintendents, problems with all kinds of things. But if I want to look back at 20 years, we've always been desirable, meaning that we had high test scores at all areas, not just high SATs and good APs, but at all areas, elementary on up, high test scores, and as Art pointed out, taxes around the middle, sometimes probably even lower than that. So we were very desirable. Now I think it is safe to say maybe we're not as desirable for different reasons. I'm almost wondering why the board's looking at it this year and not. You didn't really take Dr. Resnick up on it last year. I mean, did you have a meeting with the group of realtors? Because it does hurt your positioning. We don't want to be Cheltenham. They have got some good things going, but it's not their taxes. And I'd like to know if this current budget, are you deliberately not putting 2 positions in because of this, because you're trying to keep the taxes down? Because I'm still confused about these positions. I guess I would like to know if the 2 retirements, is the money put aside that you could, obviously, if somebody senior retires, you can hire people at a lower rate. Is that money actually in the budget yet, or can it not be in the budget until they actually retire? Because that could enable you to get 2 teachers, perhaps, if you still need them. Okay, I also wanted to comment on the recess issue. I'm a little disappointed because back in December, Dr. Wheeler, you very clearly said that there wasn't going to be any time in recess cut. There was an issue it had started brewing in November. In December, the NBC News was here. You spoke to NBC News and said there's no recommendation to cut time in recess. We will not cut time in recess, something like that. And if that's back on the table, how are community members, parents, whatever, supposed to trust your word? And I personally don't think it's enough to just put this in a newsletter. And thank God for the Ambler Gazette that I saw the article that recess is back, cutting recess, I should say, is back on the table. But when the superintendent stands up at a meeting or speaks to the news and says, we're not doing it, and then a few months later, the committee's still working on it and they're looking for feedback, well, you're going to get a petition with a lot of feedback.
Time is up, Nina.
All right, well, I'm going to fit one more quick thing in before Ken jumps out of his seat to get rid of me. Feedback's really important. And all these other issues, you should be doing surveys. There was an article saying how great the detracking is at the high school. You don't know that. You don't know that unless you've surveyed those high school parents. You don't know how good or bad your math program is. A lot of people hate it. You don't know how good or bad the new language arts is. And again, I will give you credit, Art. I will give Dr. Resnick credit, because at previous meetings, you've both agreed with me that there used to be a curriculum review process where we did surveys, and we used to do it before changes were made and after. And that's a way of identifying strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, Anita.
And you're not doing it anymore.
Okay.
And that can affect your test scores.
Thank you.
Jen Kuznets, Fort Washington. I just wanted to, while you guys were talking about the tax increase or the decrease of the increase, or however we want to phrase it, I feel like someone on the board said it's about, choices and how much money you have, and that's why you're foregoing or delaying hiring instructional support. I'm not sure I heard that correctly, but that concerns me because I feel like that's what this second recess problem is all about. Any argument that other districts have only one recess doesn't really count because we have a longer day by 20, sometimes 30 minutes. So I don't really see a reason why we can't fit in the second recess in order to make way for RTII. You may remember Upper Dublin used to have RTII, and we had 2 recesses, and we have the same day we do now. So for me, the only 2 changes are we have less teachers and we have new curriculum. So is it a combination of both? Is that's what it seems like to the public, is that's why we can't fit it in, because the curriculum's too difficult to get through and we need longer blocks of it in order for them to do it, or we don't have the staff to staff intervention properly. Like I don't know. So I'll just clarify that question about the instructional support. What else do I have? And then I just had a question. There was a comment about we have to build back up our savings, and other districts have savings and we have to build back up our savings. So why has our savings been so depleted? Was it from the high school project? What was it, I guess? What's the reason for that? And I would just like to say and get on record that, I'm against a new construction middle school project. I think we should fix what we have and be really conservative with that. It's maybe not the most desirable floor plan, but it would be a lot cheaper to fix, according to the Dewey Engineering report that was done, if we were to go down the list of 8s all the way to 1s and fix everything with their estimated totals, and I know it's a little bit off date, it's still significantly less than adding a new wing or, building a new building. And so for me, less money on the physical building could mean more money on staff and instructional staff and supports and things of that nature. And I just think that that's more important and more effective when we're trying to help students. This high school is beautiful, but I don't think that it's really increased our academic performance in the sense of test scores, rankings, SAT results, AP scores. It doesn't seem like numbers released have netted us a better result than before the new construction project. That's it.
Hi, good evening. I'm Karen Zipfel, 1201 Cedar Road in Ambler. But I'm waiting for my 4 minutes. Okay.
Start early.
I'm not getting cheated out of that. I work in healthcare. I'm a physical therapist. I work with stroke patients who have to relearn things. I know that doesn't seem particularly applicable at the school board meeting, but I really use exercise every single day to get my patients working. Speech therapists will come in and co-treat during my session because my patients think better during that session. I took about 15 minutes last night working in healthcare with evidence-based practice. I want to know what's actually out there. And looking up exercise, children, and cognitive function, there were thousands of links, so I decreased it and just pulled up meta-analysis. There were 4 studies from 2003 to 2012, and I'm sure some of them overlap. They went 19 to 79 studies each, but it was 200 combined studies. They showed their key points. Physical activity had a positive effect on cognition. The type didn't matter. It increased perceptual scores, IQ, achievement, and motor and verbal test scores. It improves focus and working memory. The greatest effect is acute. It's not chronic. It's at that moment. It's immediately after with a small time after that. So it's not that if you have recess at 10 o'clock in the morning, that's going to have a great effect at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when my 7-year-old is still sitting in a math class. So my case study for you tonight is actually my 7-year-old who's having to sit in the back tonight, going from an ethics meeting that I was just at and made him sit through an hour and a half, and now he's here with you tonight. He is not happy about any of this. He has been sitting still too long, but that's not my story. My story is that he broke his clavicle 6.5 weeks ago. My objective data, now keep in mind I am related to him. This is not the perfect study. The ones I gave you, I printed out copies if you want them. Those are the meta-analyses. Mine's an individual case study. My son scored on the time frequency test where they're looking at how do you do on your math scores. He had scored a 42 out of 60 on the first one he took. With practice, he then moved up to a 57. He broke his clavicle. He hasn't been allowed to participate in recess or gym for the last 6.5 weeks. He scored a 51, a 48, and his last one was a 42 last week. I cannot wait for him to be able to participate in recess again. Please don't take that away from my son. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, sir. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, if anybody else wants to community input, please just form a line in the back, please.
Hi. Excuse me. Hi, my name's David Lagerstedt. I'm a doctor and an assistant professor at the University of the Sciences, and I live on 16 Ambler Road. This is just a kind of a follow-up to Karen's story. I have a scientific policy brief here that really talks about not only the cognitive, but also the academics, social, and behavioral benefits of exercise and recess. As you know, the recent changes are going to be mostly felt by our children in the elementary school. In the current elementary school change proposal, second recess that's given to at least 75% of children will be eliminated for 3rd to 5th grade students. And as you know, recess is an essential part of a student's day, and for many students, it's their favorite part of the day. Unfortunately, since the enactment of No Child Left Behind, upwards of 32% of schools have had a reduction in recess time. And this is partly due to a focus on test achievement scores and school administrators' desire to have a higher ranking in both state and national publications, that's resulted not only a decrease in recess, but also in the arts, physical education. Additionally, students in need of remedial learning or enriched learning experiences have had withdrawn recess time to increase academic performance. However, there is scant evidence, there's very little evidence to actually support that these strategies actually increased test scores or performance. However, there's no data to suggest that recess or physical activity has a negative impact on student achievement. So this change in the current policy to further reduce recess and physical activity can have dire and unintended consequences on a child's development. So some of the benefits of recess are after physical activity, students demonstrate actually an improved academic performance, and that's likely due to an interruption of intense cognitive attention. So if we have these large blocks of instruction without any kind of interruption like recess, students are going to perform worse. And the data is there to support it. Behaviorally, children who have recess have better on-task behavior and increased on-task attention time. And unrestricted recess is an outlet for stress and facilitating attention. I can hand this brief to you after I'm done, but lastly, I want to talk about some policy recommendations. So having a continued 15-minute recess period can serve as a mental and physical break from academic instruction. You need to protect recess and physical activity periods as an essential part of a student's day, not as a privilege to be taken away from a student as punishment. And you should develop a standard inclement research policy that provides consistent guidelines for decisions regarding outdoor recess. So really my question is I'm just concerned that why the board would continue to consider this change in resource policy that's misguided and not based, but actually contradicts scientific literature. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. This is Melanie Butler. Fort Washington is my area. I have a question regarding the most recent report with those that are more economically disenfranchised performing lower. The achievement gap may be very real. I am curious as to whether or not there's allocation of funds and or resources to address that issue within the existing budget, and or if not, if in fact we do decrease the tax for the 2017-2018 year, do we decrease at an amount that will still allocate budget funding for us to financially address supporting the needs of those students who are economically disadvantaged? I say that not just for those particular students, but for any students who have additional needs that will support the expenses. For example, the instructional support that Ms. Ludwig said. If we need additional resources available in the classrooms to support certain students because there's a learning need or disability and or lack of resources there with that household, and that would help improve our test scores, would it be in our best interest as a district to help support financially the needs to spend that money in that way that's meaningful to not only increase performance, but also to increase our position with having a desirable school district? It's a question that I have because I hear so many different things, variables, without consideration of the needs of the schools. And I thank you, for Dr. Resnick, for the proposition to decrease the tax increase. But to the extent that we decrease the tax increase, maybe we can also consider the programs that we've previously not been able to fund because it was not allocated in the budget. Just a recommendation. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Butler.
Hi there. Julia Watt, Fort Washington. I have a fourth grader, second grader, and 3-year-old, and professionally, I'm a pediatric speech and language pathologist. As many parents cannot attend these meetings, as well as many other meetings in our district, a group of concerned community members developed a petition. We needed our voices to be heard, and over the past 4 days, over 380 people, almost all of them Upper Dublin community members, have signed this petition. Many, many comments followed. We are petitioning that the administration and the board continue our 2 20-minute recess blocks that are currently given to over 75% of our children. Not recess/play, not movement breaks, and not an optional recess, but designated blocks in their schedule. We have a 7-hour school day, one of the longest in the areas. I challenge all of us as adults to shadow a 3rd grader for their rigorous 7-hour day and only get outside for 25 minutes. That 25 minutes is not really 25 minutes. I volunteer up at school often during recess time, and that 25 minutes is currently now is 20. It's 10, 15 minutes with transition coming in and out from the school into the cafeteria. It's a short time. The recess that the kids love is the second recess. The teachers are out there. There's a different feel within the kids. It's not the recess aides. It's the teachers, and they go in and out from their classrooms. It's an easy in and out. That second recess, I can't tell you the joy that it brings to the children. In the past 4 years, Upper Dublin has initiated so many curriculum changes: Eureka, the new science, ReadyGen, one-to-one technology, detracking in the high school. We need to just stop and breathe and evaluate all these changes that we've implemented. The new language art curriculum should have had phonemic knowledge and awareness in it. And now we quickly chose ReadyGen, and now we're backpedaling and paying more money in foundations. And with the RTII coming up, and even, we're paying PTAs and our district, we're paying kids, we're getting them standing desks, we're getting them balls to bounce on, we are providing mindfulness for them. Why are we taking away recess? We ask you to stop making any of these changes to our schedule so that our teachers can teach with quality, not quantity. Our teachers are our key. We want them to be here. We want them to love what they do. And we should be a leader in Upper Dublin, halting this trend of more and more instructional time. Our kids are getting so stressed, and it really needs to stop. I do thank the board members and administrations for the ones who are questioning these changes and supporting these students. So I really would like to know, what research do you have that is going to support this? Because I have found none. I'd also like to know, why was it stated, Dr. Wheeler stated that we will not cut recess and we would be cutting it for 75% of our students. Also, just want to jump in about the Sandy Run, night and day between the high school and the middle school. And just word around the community is that, the middle school needs lots and lots of love. I agree. I don't think we need to rebuild this big palace like we have up here at the high school. Our kids need to have a little bit of grit. They need to know that it's okay. You can go to a school and not have all the bells and whistles. Many, many people graduated and are successful from this school, from these schools. And also, as Anita said, surveys. Please, please use surveys. When you have these committees together, for Sandy Run Committee, for elementary, use surveys. Ask us what we want. They're our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watt.
Hi, everyone. I'm Veronica Lambert, also in Fort Washington. And again, firstly, I would like to thank the board for being involved and having these discussions among yourselves and involving the community and listening to us. I know many of you volunteer for this position, and I think it's a very noble thing that you do. So we're appreciative. I'm also here to talk about the schedule, having a 5-year-old in elementary school. I came out, we're new to the district. I mentioned this before. I came out last fall for the first time, and I've been coming to these meetings ever since because I'm trying to understand how it functions and how the decisions are being made. I'd also like to understand this. I'd like to understand why the schedule hasn't been shared with the community proactively. It would help maybe even to have it here to see, what are we talking about? And I'm also here not just representing myself, but my husband as well, who, someone has to be home with our daughter. And if he were up here, then he'd have more of the scientific data that has been mentioned. It's abundant. We cannot ignore it. He's a scientist, so he'd be, rattling off all this information. I'm on the other spectrum, so I will not. But it's out there, and I would encourage you, I would really ask you to take a little bit of time to look at those links. And while speaking to the property values, I do believe property value is important for the community. But more importantly, I think the child's well-being is much more important than property values. And I'd like to know whether the people that are talking to the school board or pressuring the school board to about these taxes, if they have children in the schools or if they're more concerned just about their properties. I think that's an important distinction. Let me see. And also the latest email from Dr. Wheeler that went out over the weekend, I was just surprised. One of the paragraphs that talked about the recess and cutting it to just 25 minutes, I agree with these parents that spoke before. It's not enough for our children. And then, interestingly, the second paragraph to follow was talking about suicide and having high schoolers understand and becoming aware of what, this topic. I don't remember having to discuss suicide when I was in high school. I know it was probably present, but not as present as it is today. And I do think that children are very stressed. They have a lot of anxiety. They're now having to have little fidget toys. It's a different world that we live in. And taking away recess is not the solution. They need this time to play. They need this time to socialize. They need this time to be themselves and to interact with other children, whether in their class or other classes. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lambert.
Good evening, Irene Flannery. Good evening, Irene Flannery from Fort Washington. I am a mom of 5 children. My kids are 17, 12, 11, 7, and 2. So I have one in the high school, one in the middle school, one in 5th grade, one in 1st grade, and one home with me that will be going through the school district. My oldest is in honors German and was recently inducted into the NHS. He loves the language program. I know there was a question about that earlier. I just wanted to let y'all know that that's going really well. As far as everything else goes, my 5th grader was held in all except for 5 times between September and the end of October for the second recess. This affected her to the point where she would come home and literally not even want to sit to do her homework. So after sitting for the entire school day, she would come home and have 50 minutes of homework to do, followed by 20 minutes of required reading per night. So she was required to sit an additional 70 minutes after we sat down for half an hour for dinner. By the time bedtime rolled around, she was just bouncing off the walls, and it affected our entire family. Well, this continued to affect her throughout the school year, and it was recommended back in January that I have her evaluated. So we went through the evaluation, and last Friday we put an IEP in place that stated they can't exactly say that your daughter has ADHD, but her IEP results were suggestive of ADHD. And I really wonder if there's a correlation. Whether there is or not, she needs to get out. She cannot sit for that amount of time. So when we look at how are we going to fund all these additional instructors for special needs children, let's not get there in the first place by letting them get out and go stim outside at recess if they have to, or run around and get some of that energy out. So as a mom, I'm not here to go against any of the wonderful minds and the great ideas that I've heard tonight at this school board meeting. I'm asking you to please allow our children to have that playtime. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flattery.
My name is Alicia Bush. I am a parent. I'm from Maple Glen. I'm a parent at Jarrowtown. I have a 5th grader who is going to the middle school next year, and I have a current 2nd grader. So I have a little different of a take on this. So in my professional life, I'm a early literacy specialist. Currently, I work in the Philadelphia School District. My job is to support teachers K-3 on better practices in literacy instruction. I have been in the school district since my oldest, 11 and a half, has been in kindergarten. We are light years behind in literacy instruction, light years. And I work in the school district of Philadelphia, which most people would think is light years behind Upper Dublin. Not the case. My son, who is in 5th grade, has very rarely in his 6 years in Upper Dublin been seen on grade level reading. He is an on grade level or above grade level reader, but he reads in a class of however many students he is in, never in a small group. That is not best practices in literacy. So yes, I do believe recess is important, absolutely. I happen to be in a school district where there is nothing to do at recess. There is not one stitch of nothing on a playground. And the pavement is so rocky, those kids can't even run. So when I look out at Jarrowtown, I am completely blessed and thankful for what my kids have. But on the other hand, I'm not blessed and thankful for what my kids have received in literacy. I'm concerned that my son, who is on or above grade level, is going to go to middle school and flop. Why? Because he's never learned what to do when he gets to something in a book he doesn't know. So what are we going to do about that? Well, if it means that the teachers can say, you know what, today we might need to stay in, but tomorrow we'll go out. I, as a literacy person and as a parent, am okay with that. I might get lynched on the way out in the parking lot. I might need a bodyguard, but that's how I feel. I want my kid to leave Upper Dublin and be able to read. And not for nothing, but all the people who complain when our name's not on a list, why do you think their name's not on a list? Our name's not on a list. They're not getting what they need in elementary school. And it comes all the way up. And listen, we're in a great position, a lot of us. If your kid is in 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th grade and struggles, a lot of us are able to say, you know what, I'm going to get my son a tutor. I'm going to get my daughter a tutor. But there are people that cannot do that. It's the job of the elementary school to teach our kids what they need to get through life and school successfully. It is not happening in our elementary schools in literacy. And as much as people complain about ReadyGen, it's the curriculum. It's not the way, it's not everything. It's the resources. So I urge you, in whatever way you can, to compromise and to see both sides of the story and give the minutes, but give the recess in some way so that everyone is happy, but that we can see our kids excel and learn and know what it's like to have best practices in literacy instruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bush.
Hi, Jackie Simons, Maple Glen and Sandy Run schools. So with regard to the test scores, I think we should look back to basics. Look back 10 or 20 years ago when we were considered to be a blue ribbon school district. We used to be a desirable place to live, and I don't feel like it is anymore. I'm sorry. I know the standardized tests have changed, so we do have to teach to manage that, but I think that if we stop chasing the scores with the new curriculum and get back to basics, I think maybe the scores will come. I think right now we're maybe chasing something that isn't there. We need to look back to what we're doing. Fancy, some of the Eureka Math, all the nicer names of the curriculums, it's nice, but we need to get back to basics and teach the way we used to teach. I feel like we're being reactive to something. I don't even know if we know what we're being reactive to, because I feel like what we've been doing isn't really getting us where we want to go. So it seems like, we're making choices, but maybe we need to look at things a different way and make choices in a different way and look back to what we used to do to when there was more success. I mean, you know, all the comments and statistics about recess, you know this. I mean, nobody has to tell you any of this. You know it. And you know that's not the answer, but maybe we don't know what is. Maybe if you collectively poll the community, we have a lot of smart people here. There's power in numbers. You know, there can be a lot of good ideas brought to you if you just maybe take more surveys and take more notice of what the community members have to say. So I guess that's really it. I mean, just use what we offer. We're here for you, you're here for us, but I think we need to work together a little bit better to come up with another way to do this, because a lot of people just aren't really satisfied with what we've been doing with all the changes. Too many changes, chasing after something. Let's stop and look back and see what were we doing and how can we get there again. And with regard to just the taxes, I mean, I have a lot of friends that are moving, and I'm always like, come here, live near me. Houses on my street are for sale. And what do you think their reply is? Taxes are too high. We're not coming there. And now I can't even say, well, we have great schools, but I can't even show them the numbers to show that what I'm saying is real. So, I mean, I love what you all are doing. I try to, think of things I can do to help. But maybe you just really need to have a community meeting and really take to heart what people suggest and say. And it certainly can't hurt. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Diamond.
Hi, how are you? I'm Megan Hogan. I'm a Fort Washington parent. I've been trying to wrap my head around RTII for the last couple of months now. It seems like it's the catalyst for a lot of changes that are going through our district at the elementary school level. And from my best understanding of it, a small percentage of children will benefit from small group work with a reading specialist. And to me, I would like to see a greater number of children benefit from having access to a reading specialist and or a small group. The way it's been explained to me, it seems a little antiquated. And I wanted to know what research the district has done on the latest trends of intervention, and also the statistics of support staff and reading staff of neighboring school districts compared to Upper Dublin. We seem behind on staffing, and money could be better spent on bodies instead of books and curriculum, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Swan, if there's anybody else, please step up. Okay.
Yeah, Bill Swan of Glenside, Dr. Levinowitz, board members, Dr. Wheeler, members of the community. Just a shout out to the high school spring concert last week, the students, the staff, and the administration who supported it, and a great annual arts show the week before. Music and arts are looking good in the district. And a quick mention regarding recess. I had it. I'm sure all of you had it. I don't think there's any need to reduce it or eliminate it. Kids need it. It's an outlet. They have to, get up, stretch their legs a few minutes and just get it out of their system before coming back down. I'll save the rest for later.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, Michelle Haggerty, Fort Washington. I just wanted to say something just mention something that you had talked about before about the new developments. I haven't been to many township meetings, I have to admit. But the one that I did go to, they said that it would probably take about 10, maybe 10 plus years to fill all those residential apartments and housing and all that stuff. So it concerns me if we're going to be counting on that money for future revenue. I don't know if that helps or, hurts my lower taxes theory, but I think that we should be careful when we try to think about future money coming in, like when we did with the Expo Center. We were really counting on new businesses to come in and help with tax money there, and kind of really hasn't done a whole lot in that regard. So I think we should be careful when we're looking to future monies for these new residential developments that we are counting on. I also want to say, speak to the recess that many of the parents here have talked about. I, as well as Mrs. Flannery, have issues with students having special needs. And I sat in a meeting last week discussing my son's needs. And one of the things that they had come up with was that he needs to take breaks when needed. I find that shocking that that needs to be said and put on a piece of paper. I understand that there needs to be structure in the classroom. I get that, and I get that all children learn at different paces and all children have different needs. But to actually write that a child needs a break during the day is crazy to me. So thank you for bringing that up. I feel the same way. I did a little test after our 504 meeting that day, and I sat my son down with his homework, and I said, you know what, we're going to do this homework till we're done. And with this child, it is extremely frustrating to do homework until it's done. So we did it. It took us 2.5 hours. He was frustrated. He hated me. He cried. He threw his pencil. He was really agitated. So the next night, I said, you know what? We're going to take a different approach. We're going to do a little bit, and when you get frustrated, we're going to take a break. Do you know it took us 20 minutes to do homework? Just keep that in mind when you're thinking about recess and these children. They all have different needs. They all have different ways of learning. But it really is important that we give them the breaks that we need because they really do need them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haggerty.
Ginny Vitella Ambler. Well, I missed most of the public comments because I was at the Sandy Run Band concert that was in the same building, and they did a great show. And I want to thank Sean Kennedy and the 7th and 8th grade Mrs. B. something, I don't pronounce it. I think it's unfortunate that it was scheduled at the same time as the legislative meeting, so we weren't supporting our students in the arts. I'm sure I'm a ditto on all the recess comments. And my other comment that I am very upset about and frustrated is the kindergarten assessment situation. It seems like that's a go, and I think I heard the quotes come out of someone's mouth that some districts do pink and blue cards. I found that to be really almost offensive. It is bad enough that we are taking the teachers out of the equation entirely and putting it on the shoulders of the principals of those buildings. This is so wrong on so many levels. Every other teacher in every other grade has input on where these children might go because they know them, they get to know them. And you get to know a lot in a 20-minute meeting. For example, in our school, we might have a male kindergarten teacher. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of kids coming from preschool that was sitting down with a 20-minute with a male teacher might be panicked. Then that might not be the right person. Now, if you don't meet this child and you only have, this child has their A's and B's and C's and whatever else, then you don't get that sense. And to take away this personal meeting, even with one of the 4 teachers, because these teachers all know each other pretty well. They've been working together for years and years and years. I think is really taking out the emotion, the personality of it all. And it's really upsetting to hear. It doesn't affect me personally, but things would happen in the district, and I don't think they feel good. They don't feel right to me. I feel like I have to say something, and that really upsets me, that kindergarten assessment situation. We're taking the personalities out of the equation, and we're not giving the teachers a chance to meet these children or the children to even meet the teachers. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vitale. Seeing no one up at the podium, we will close community input, and we will begin our responses when we can. Dr. Wheeler would like to speak first.
To address the comments that I said that there would be no changes, my recollection of that meeting, I think it may have been in December, I remember that we were downstairs in the cafeteria that evening. And if I recall the situation, a couple of folks came to the podium with a schedule that they reported was the new elementary school schedule. We found out later that that was an exercise from a group of people working together. I remember stating clearly that there was no action on a schedule on that agenda. There was no recommendation. I don't recall saying that we would never change recess, and I would hesitate to do that. I would refrain from doing that because at that point there had been no decision made The piece of paper that was presented was, again, it was a draft of some work that had been done by a group of teachers. What I did say we would definitively not do at that meeting was continue to keep fifth graders in from recess to make up work. And that was addressed very quickly. The question of, and I'm jumping around here a bit, the question of ReadyGen and the supplemental materials, when the recommendation was made last spring, and Mrs. Morrison can correct me if I'm misremembering this, we understood that there was some question about how effective ReadyGen would be with what we call phonics. And we knew at that time that we would be putting some supplemental materials into place to supplement what our primary teachers felt was missing from ReadyGen. So we went into that adoption knowing that we would have to be supplementing to some extent. Mrs. Bush spoke about guided reading instruction, and that is one of the features in ReadyGen, which was one of the things that led us to make the decision to recommend adoption of that program, which really is a nice collection of resources. The idea that all of our standardized test data is low is not accurate. I did focus in my remarks about, my recent remarks about the fact that we have not been ranked in U.S. News for the past 2 years, because that is a specific example that has been raised by some members of our community. We continue to have excellent data with our advanced placement courses, with our SATs. Our students continue to go to very, very highly competitive colleges. But I made a purposeful decision to reference the U.S. News simply because that is a topic that has been raised specifically. If there is, Dr. Miner, is there anything that you specifically would like to add, because you are working with the group that's considering what an elementary schedule will look like?
Yes, there are a few things I'd like to add, and again, there was a lot said, so if I missed anything that anybody still has a question about, please let me know. I'll start with the question about kindergarten assessments. We've talked about that several times, and I, in fact, was the person who brought up the idea of dividing up kids by pink cards and blue cards. And in fact, that is a common practice in many school districts. And the reason that that is done is because when you just take that and take the cards and set them into 3 or 4 groups, however many classes you're making, statistically that makes heterogeneous groups. And so that was my point. The primary function is to make heterogeneous groups in this process. And so statistically, many school districts do that by a card sort. So that was the reference to that particular comment. I heard a lot of people talk about the elimination of recess. And that I know is a concern in the community. It is not, in my mind, what the scheduling committee is talking about at this point. Right now, in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade schedules, there's 20 minutes for lunch, 20 minutes for recess, and then an additional 20 minutes of scheduled recess in 3 of the buildings, not in Maple Glen. And so what is on the table right now as the most recent draft is a 50-minute lunch/recess period, time for kids to socialize, play. There can even be flexibility within that, so older kids maybe do 30 minutes of recess and 20 minutes of lunch because they can get through the lunch line, open their milks, those sorts of things more quickly. So the difference then in time is functionally 10 minutes. And what the scheduling committee is proposing is not eliminating that 10 minutes or that additional recess time, but instead giving teachers the flexibility to be responsive to the needs of their students, so that one day I may feel that my students in the morning have been working very hard. I can see on their faces that they need a break, and I take that responsive recess at that point. Another day I might take it in the afternoon following some challenging math work. It's not the idea of eliminating that time. It's increasing the lunch recess time so that kids can finish a game together, they can have a nice conversation at lunch, and then giving teachers flexibility to be responsive to students. And that, again, is what has been happening at Maple Glen quite successfully for the last 6 years. I heard a lot of people talk about the benefits of recess and physical activity. There's no doubt that recess and physical activity are important part of a school day. I also have heard a lot of people talk about the length of the school day at Upper Dublin, and we have said that this committee is going to likely be a multi-year committee. And I do think that long term, we do need to look at the length of that day and determine whether or not that is where we want to continue to go moving forward, or if we do want to shorten that day. I think that's something that we should be willing to look at and discuss as part of our process. There was some questions about RTI and the research around RTI. I presented on RTI at the last Education Committee meeting, and the final slide, I referenced 4 researchers in the area who anybody who's interested can certainly look at their work on the topic, as well as the research base for the interventions that we have selected. Part of the comment around that was also whether or not reading specialists would see fewer children as a result of RTI. And my honest answer to that is it's possible that they may. However, right now, if you have one reading specialist working with 10 children, all 10 of those children are getting a very diluted experience versus reading specialists working with something like a group of 4. Our efforts in the schedule are to maximize our reading specialists so that they both provide interventions, but then also push into classrooms where they can support students right there in ReadyGen in the work that they're doing. So the primary focus in the schedule is making sure that we are maximizing all of our human and time and resources of time to make sure that we're doing the best that we can for our students. Another comment regarded the fact that on the current draft schedule, it says recess/play, and there seemed to be some offense taken to that. Again, the intention of having it say recess/play was that there are some movements right now to have recess be a structured time, and our intention there was to call out the fact that it was meant to be time that the children self-direct and play. So that's certainly a term that we can remove if it's causing some confusion in terms of the wording around that. In terms of sharing the schedule publicly, we do have parents who are represented on the committee. We have had 2 evening coffees, one at Fort Washington right at the beginning of the process, one at Maple Glen, a couple of meetings in, a morning meeting at Jarretttown, and we have 2 more morning meetings coming up at Thomas Fitzwater and at Fort Washington, where we will continue to share the schedule. It is a document that is literally being drafted and redrafted every single day based on feedback, and I anticipate it will continue to be. And I actually look forward to having conversations with parents about the potential benefit of having a flexible, responsive recess versus a scheduled one. And I think the committee is very open to that feedback and making sure that, again, it serves the best interests of students. So I think that's everything I had in my notes. I don't know if I missed anything.
Okay. And if I may, as I'm going through, I'm tying some threads together here on some questions about data and instructional support teacher positions, and Mrs. Butler's comments about not shortchanging students with the potential budget decrease. First, there was a comment that we have no data to rate what's been happening with our reduction in course levels at 9th grade. We do. We have data that is both addressing grades and data addressing behavior incidents. Last year, of course, was the baseline. This year is the new data. We can't look at trends, but the data that we have is indicating that we are being successful in both of those areas. So to kind of tie together those other 2 comments, in the budget as it exists now, we do have supports to continue to address the achievement gap. We have several positions in there, and we continue to provide professional development for our teachers, professional development for support staff as well, all designed to help
ameliorate that achievement gap that we have and to help specific groups of students increase their achievement. I just want to stress that when this budget, which is still a draft, hopefully will be adopted, or a bottom line will be set tonight, and the budget will be adopted next month. We never had what we're calling instructional support specialist positions. Those were never in this budget at any point. We spoke about our desire to do that. We are looking hopefully at the following budget year to do that, but those were not eliminated from the draft because they were never in there. What we did for positions was add, originally when the budget proposal was made by the administration, we had 4 new positions. We then added 2 additional positions. Those are dedicated to the middle school. So we are continuing to fund what we need to fund, both through staffing and through initiatives to support reduction of that achievement gap. So we're very cognizant of that, and whatever number the board decides we are focusing on this evening, we will keep those needs in mind as we make whatever reductions we need to in the recommendations of what goes into that budget.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wheeler. Before I respond, I just wanted to see if any board members wanted to answer some of the questions. Okay, Mr. Sirota or Ms. Hester?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I know that people are concerned about the elimination of recess, but that is not even a consideration and is not a factor. There is no final decision that has been made, and there has not even been a final recommendation. And I think that people are very much concerned about what's going on because they are basing their fears on assumptions and misinformation that people are giving you. There is no final decision. It is still a process. As recently as a few days ago, a board member emailed all the board members about recess in other school districts in the area. So it is an ongoing discussion. There is no final decision. It's fluid as we go. One of the other things I wanted to address too was the detracking at the high school. As Dr. Wheeler indicated, there is data that indicates that it is working. And I also believe that during the school year, we have discussed staffing at the elementary schools, well, at all of the schools. But we've also had discussions, even in this board meetings, about when there is an ability, or we're monitoring class sizes, so that if we can move teachers around in an area so that they can also provide more instructional support if needed. So it is an ongoing process. It's something that we are considering every day. We're discussing the elimination of the achievement gap, and we're actually considering factors and working towards doing that. The other concern was that I know there was a mention that surveys should be taken, and I do believe that parents, the community, everyone needs to have input. But decisions also need to be made after proper study, after consideration of the relevant data, after doing what, for example, our committees do. They visit other schools, they consult specialists, they read articles, but those things need to be considered. But surveys should never be the primary reason why we make a decision with regard to anything in the school district, because it needs to be made on correct information and not on persons' feelings or not on people's emotions. If we had had a survey about detracking in the schools, I suspect that there would be a considerable number of people that would be opposed to it. But because we did the study, because we realized that it is a beneficial program, and we are seeing the benefits of it now.
Thank you. Okay, we're waiting. We can come back to you.
Okay.
Okay, Dr. Ludwig.
Sorry.
I have one that's addressed Ms. Haggerty. With regard to the new developments and counting on the revenue from the new developments, when a housing development comes in, the new revenue comes both when it's sold and then when it's owned by the owner. With the promenade, which will be apartments, The apartments, you get the revenue as soon as the new owner opens, takes possession of the building and opens the unit. You don't have to wait for all the apartments to be rented. So it's actually a slightly different process. So I mean, nothing's set, and you can't count on anything, because all kinds of things can happen. But I don't think you have to worry about the 10 years to rent the apartments. I have one other comment about recess. I don't know if it's really an answer to a question or more a comment. I think I've tried to look at some of the research myself, and I think we can all agree about the importance of breaks, the importance of unstructured time for social and emotional development, the importance of physical activity during the day. However, I could never find anything that said how many recesses, what the amount of time between them should be. If anybody, I haven't looked at the things that people gave in. Nothing that I found in the studies that I looked at was specific about, is it better to have 30 minutes of recess in one block or 15 minutes? I really don't know. I'm not arguing for or against anything. I'm saying I didn't see anything that said one way or another. When you look at how long after someone has a break do the benefits accrue, is it 10 minutes? Is it 30 minutes? Is it 2 hours? If it's 10 minutes, do we have to have a break every 10 or 15 minutes? I know I'm kind of taking it to the extreme. I don't mean to be putting down anybody's ideas. I'm really saying that questions like that I didn't see in the research. And if anybody has research that addresses those, I'd be interested in seeing it.
Thank you.
Can I interject? Oh, I'm sorry. Can I interject one more thing about recess real quickly?
Where's that? Is
This
that
is Kim.
Doctor?
Hi, I'm way down here. I'm usually around the corner so you can see me. I apologize. One of the, obviously this is a very important topic, and one of the research studies that I found, and I'd be happy to share at the coffees and with the board, was conducted. It's actually a meta-analysis and a series of recommendations put together by the CDC, the Department of Health, and a group called SHAPE, that is an acronym for Professional Health and Physical Educators, and it was put out in January 2017. In there, they specifically say a minimum of 20 minutes, but more importantly than that, they talk about some really other things that should be guaranteed about recess, and I'm glad that this whole conversation has been sparked. I was very saddened when the mother came up this evening and talked about her daughter missing recess all year. I know Dr. Wheeler addressed that early on, and that is in fact one of the clear recommendations from this panel, is that recess is never taken away as a punishment. It also recommends that physical activity is never given to students as a punishment. It recommends specifically that recess always occur before lunch, which is one of the changes that we have made in some of the buildings, so that all of our recesses occur before lunch. They have found that to be really important. And so I do want to assure the committee that not only are we looking at it in terms of the time and the schedule, but all of those other considerations that in my role as director of elementary, I really want to review with our elementary staff and team, even to the point of having professional development for aides that are staffing recess to make sure that it's the most supportive environment for student successful play that it can be. So I'd be happy to share that document if anyone's interested.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Miner. Ms. Rothman.
Thank you. I wanted to address a couple points. Ms. Butler asked if when we're talking about the tax decreases going away from 2.5%, if that's going to affect our students. And that's one thing I think that no, we're looking at taking it away essentially from the fund balance, from our savings account. So I don't think any of us here are looking at cutting programs, anything like that. We're just talking about the end of the day, what are we going to have in the savings account? So that won't directly affect our students and programs. The other thing is I'm really appreciative of all the comments about recess. Just with the timeline of it, obviously we don't have a proposal before us. We haven't been given a formal proposal, the board or even the education committee. And that's something, as a member of the education committee, we're expecting at the next meeting on May 30th. And as Dr. Miner said, there's still more meetings that the work group themselves are doing and are going to be continuing to update their draft. And they also have the 2 more meetings, this coffee and conversations at the 2 of the elementary school buildings to receive input and to give more in-depth discussion than we can have necessarily at a meeting like this. Obviously, we all have emails too that are on the website, so you're more than welcome to email us and call with discussions. But May 30th is what I'm looking forward to seeing the proposal with some rationale attached to it, why everything specific, because we do have a group of dedicated volunteers and administrators that have been working on this for the last several months. So I'm interested to hear what and why what the proposal is, as well as, of course, what, as an elementary school parent and as all the parents hearing here, our concerns.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else on the board?
Just briefly.
Okay,
I just
Ms.
wanted to
Hester.
say that I think that Mrs. Haggerty made a statement about, I guess, income sources for the school district, and I believe there was a statement made about the depletion of savings. And I just wanted to make a comment about, we get most of our revenue through taxes. Unlike a lot of the school districts surrounding us, they have a significant commercial base. Abington, Wissahickon. Wissahickon has a borough and 2 townships. Upper Dublin is a single township, and we don't have a large commercial base. So, and I just wanted to explain that those townships have access to more income, actually, and more revenue than we do. Just wanted to offer that explanation.
Thank you. Mr. Chmielewski.
Yes, on that same point, which was brought up probably about an hour and a half ago by now.
It's okay. Well, we're here.
It was asked, why is our fund balance, why is our savings depleted? And I've been on the board for over 15 years, and I believe it was even true even before I got on the board. Upper Dublin was not one that taxed and then put money in savings for a future project. What Upper Dublin would do prior to Act 1 was, if a project needed to be done, they borrowed the money at that point and then paid debt service. And part of that debt service is a lot of interest. That was the Upper Dublin play. And that's the way Wade Coleman, former business administrator, would put it. That's the play we do. Other people do a different play. They put money aside. They tax, as Mr. Petrusky has said many times over when I brought it up one time, they tax in advance. They tax in advance, put the money aside. Some people would call it proper planning. You don't buy a house with no money. You generally have the down payment ready to buy the house. Well, they would tax in advance. They'd put the money aside so that when a project would come up, they didn't have to borrow as much, and they got the project done that way. We haven't done it that way. The high school project was a project that was done through referendum. $119.2 million was borrowed. It was approved by the taxpayers. That amount was borrowed in several borrowings, and that money was used to build this building on time and on budget. But we haven't had the luxury of a large fund balance. A lot of what's happened around our surrounding communities is they've had a large fund balance. They decided they weren't going to do a major project, and they used that money to fund their operating expenses so that they didn't have to have a tax increase. There was a number of districts around our surrounding communities that had a 0% tax increase. How can you do that when all your expenses are still going up? You do it because you're pulling from your fund balance. That's the way they did it. We haven't had that luxury. So what we have to do is we have to cover our increases in expenses with an increase in taxes. That's the way we've had to do it. I've been concerned about 2 things. One is the scope of a project at Sandy Run. And going back 2-3 years ago, I was trying to come up with any kind of way to reduce that scope even to the extent of only having 2 grades there rather than 3. We've had 2 community task force tell us, don't do that, keep 3 grades at Sandy Run. That does mean you have, a larger scope project, whatever it should be. What that number is at this point, I don't know. It hasn't been decided. But I do know that here at this building, $119.2 million, it's about a $6 million debt service per year. It was funded by approximately 15 to 16% tax increase over a number of years to get to that number. If say it was a $60 million project at Sandy Run, just using the numbers from the high school, it would be an 8% increase. It would be a $3 million debt service that we would have to come up with. That's what concerns me when we start talking about tax increases. If we try to lower our tax increase too much, and I understand it's a lowering the increase, I get it. But if we go too low, then are we going to be able to fund a project? Because we're not going to do referendum, I don't think. So that means having to do a project within the scope of our existing budget. And when you're in Act 1, that's really tough to do, especially when you don't have a large fund balance. So those are the issues at play. If the issue is, what's the scope of the project and how much money do we have? I mean, it comes down to that. It's, whether it's in your household or here in a school district, it's the same thing. And those are the issues we're going to have to look at really closely.
Thank you, Mr. Chmielewski. Mr. Sirota.
I have a few that haven't been captured so far, and a couple comments I want to make. One is Mrs. Brister said or asked 9 years over 9 years since Act 1, our tax increase has been above the Act 1 base index. That is correct. 9 years, or the number of years that we've been above the index. That's out of 10 years of Act 1 so far. As Joe said, ballpark figure for Sandy Run. We're not there yet, but we're getting close. So we'll be forming a committee, a project review committee, we're calling it, to look at documentation around this and make sure we have all our T's crossed and I's dotted. And with the first meeting, hopefully before the end of the school year, that's the committee where we will, and there'll be public meetings, and that's the meeting where we'll present these numbers when we have them. But we don't have a number to share yet. It's not because we're keeping it secret; it's because we don't have the number yet. There was a question about whether retirement replacements are in the budget. Ms. Bray can probably comment more accurately, but I think we have 2 positions officially, and those are in the budget.
That's correct.
Regarding recess, I have a question for the board and administration. What the theme I heard from the community, I have heard from the community over several meetings is, and someone phrased it this way specifically, I think, why would the board consider something that contradicts scientific literature? My sense is that the literature, with the exception of the things the specifics that Dr. Ludwig brought up, the literature is pretty clear. And I, for one, wouldn't want to do something that contradicts scientific literature. So if there were, when it finally comes to a proposal, if there is a proposal before the board around this, I would certainly, if it does contradict literature, I as a board member are going to want to hear some pretty strong justification for that. My instinct is that that just wouldn't happen because I know Dr. Wheeler is very research-based, and I would be very surprised if something eventually came to the board that contradicted scientific literature. But again, there's no proposal so far. Let's see. And one, Mrs. Lambert asked, do the people who pressure the school board about property values as opposed to children's well-being, do those people have children in the schools? I don't know how I would balance that, but fundamentally, we as the 9 school board members are elected by the entire community. We represent everyone, whether they have children in the schools or not. So we're not only here to make the schools as great as they can at any cost. We represent everyone in the entire community. Certainly, we are a very education-friendly board. Several of us have children in the district. but we do represent absolutely everyone in the community, whether they have children or not. So it doesn't really matter to me whether the people who are pressuring us have children in the schools. If some people are pressuring us, we have to listen to them. We should listen to them. Thank you.
I can add a bit of clarity to that. The folks who have approached me directly with questions and concerns about the test scores are divided. Some do have students currently in our schools. Others have students who have graduated from our schools. So that sort of runs the gamut. Two things as I went back through. The first is, and this sort of is a reflection also on what Mark mentioned about recess. I think at some point we have some semantic issues here too. We sometimes refer to eliminating recess. In my mind, that would mean no recess at all, and we certainly would never go in that direction. Tonight, someone referred to cutting recess, which could be completely eliminating or reducing, and then we also talk about a reduction in recess time. So I think part of the work of our work group probably should be to look at the semantics of how we are talking about this. Again, we would never totally eliminate all recess. And finally, several folks gave us some information tonight, and two speakers this evening spoke about a petition. And I would urge, I don't know if there's a closing date on people adding to that petition or not, but I would urge that those results be shared with us before, much before May 30th, if possible, before a recommendation for adoption is made. So again, thank you all. I've received many emails myself, and I have to say I am very impressed, particularly after my communication over the weekend to the community. I've received some very, very thoughtful, well-written, respectful emails in which people have expressed a variety of opinions about these issues, and it is good to hear from our community. So thank you for that. Thank you for the information tonight. Thank you for getting that petition to us in time for us to really look at it before any recommendation is made, and we do listen. Thank you.
Okay, a few more things. I kind of like it. I can sit back while everybody else answers the questions, and they do a much better job than I do. Ms. Butler's question about would the potential reduction in the tax increase affect anything that we're doing with the economically disadvantaged? And emphatic no. I think we are making significant progress in terms of what we're doing with the detracking, with the additional supports, but not only academically, but there's so much that we're doing in the area of social skills, of confidence building, and what the Connections program is doing. That goes hand in hand with what we're doing with the detracking. And we need to continue to do that and expand that. The kids need to feel that they belong in this building, and I think they're starting to feel that. We have a ways to go. You know that, Ms. Butler. But I think if they feel that they belong here, they will do better. They can do better. We know they can do better. And so we would not do anything to affect the funding for any of those programs. There was also a question. Mr. Roos has been looking at his technology to see about what really occurred in December at that meeting when we had NBC here. So did you want to?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I would like to emphatically refute the statement that Dr. Wheeler allegedly said, which is that the district would not cut recess. That's not what was said at the meeting, by either at the meeting or to the media. NBC News said that Upper Dublin School District leaders have not made a decision yet, but cutting playtime is an option they are considering. Philly Voice, which covered it, talked about how Dr. Wheeler emphatically denied that discussions about scheduling had even advanced to the point of concrete recommendations for the board, and that the school district said the only options under consideration would involve shifting from multiple recess periods to one extended lunch and recess period. She didn't deny there either. And according to the Ambler Gazette article, again, no decisions have been made, Wheeler said, adding she has to balance the conflicting needs of students and taxpayers. Issues like recess and class time will be discussed at Education Committee meetings, Board President Art Levinowitz said. So exactly what's said then is what's being said now, is that no decisions or even recommendations have been made.
Mr. Petrusky asked a question about fund balance, why the fund balance was so much larger in 16-17 versus where it is now in 17-18. But what he really should have asked is to compare the fund balance currently for 16-17 based on what we projected a year ago and to see what the difference is. What happens is each year, if we do this right, you want your fund balance to increase. If you don't want it to actually decrease and have less money, but we want to budget appropriately so that if we projected I'm not sure what we projected in 16-17 a year ago.
I believe it's around 2.5 or 2.6 million dollars.
That's what I thought. And then and this year, and so we went from that 2.7 to 5.8. Actually, considering transfers, maybe a little more.
That's correct.
And what we would hope to see again is although we're projecting this year 2.9
next year at the end of June 30th, 2018, about 2.8 again.
Yes, I feel very confident that number will be higher. We want it to be higher.
We want it to be higher. It is conservative budgeting, which is always what one needs to do, and in an attempt to make sure that we always cover all of the revenues and expenses, all the expenses that we anticipate. We've also had a borrowing with Moody's, and if we are going to do that, we did a bond refunding. They look at that. It's posted on our website. One of the things that a rating agency looks at is your budgeting as well as your balances, and we are gearing ourselves, we're starting to position ourselves for another project.
And Mr. Petrusky was correct, is that we do want to get to that 8% fund balance. That's a number that we look at between 6 and 8%. I believe that's the number that's where that is 8% is.
Of an uncommitted fund balance.
Uncommitted fund balance. The question about the two positions, the two retirements, were we replacing those positions?
Yes.
Yes.
The
I wanted to make that clear.
The amount that has been reflected, and we've shown it.
Difference.
Yes, at the, I think it's April 20th Finance Committee meeting as well as tonight, it assumes that both positions will be replaced, but obviously not at the top end of the scale.
And then the other point I wanted to make, the comment was, go back 20 years, our scores were a lot higher. They looked at scores differently. Remember, it was only recently that they started to disaggregate the data, and that plays a major role now in the school performance profiles, the SPPs. Years ago, it did not. Our scores are very good. Ms. Morrison did a presentation, the last Education Committee, looking at our PSSAs, comparing it to other. Ms. Morrison, did you do that, or Dr. Miner? Ms. Morrison, looking at our PSSAs to compare them to similar districts, and they are comparable or better in some grade levels. And our keystones are very good too. Realize the SPPs are, Ms. Morrison, help me, 2 years behind?
Dr. Levinowitz, I just wanted to add the scores you're referring to was a presentation I made to the African American Students and Family Committee. I think you might be referencing those.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That is correct. Scores are banked, so when we receive SPP scores for our schools, particularly for the high school, students testing Keystone exams this year, we won't see those results for our high school until 2019.
So there is a delay, and when we look at the scores, we see they are improving.
And we do know with SPP there's a lot of utility, one example of that is that in the 2015-16 school year, Sandy Run Middle School was, out of quite a number of middle schools in the county, was number 5, with only 2 middle schools in the dark blue range. And then this year there was a significant swing. Doesn't make sense for data to change that much. So part of it is the data, part of it is the new rigorous testing, and what we are addressing, though, we look at all of our data because we do want continuous improvement, and we never want to turn a blind eye to areas that we can improve in.
And if I may add, we have to bear in mind that since 2014, we are looking not only at our achievement, our scores on the tests, which are good, we now also are being measured by how much growth year to year certain subgroups of students are making. That's where our achievement gap is showing up, is in that growth measurement, which the psychometricians out in Harrisburg inflict on us, if you will. I don't believe we should be chasing test scores either, but they are part of our brutal reality. They are on the front page of the newspaper above the fold. So we're being looked at and measured by not only our actual achievement, but on how that trends up with certain goalposts established for that over the year's time. So it is rather a complex situation when we're looking at our data.
We may remember when we scored 100% at Fort Washington, and because of that, if 2 kids or 3 kids or a number of kids do not go down, we could be at a 0 for that particular. So, for the growth, for the PVAS. So it is bizarre.
Could I just, I mean, maybe I'm just restating it, but
great.
When you look at how Upper Dublin performed 10 years ago versus today, the measures are different. The tests are different. The standards are different. So it doesn't really make sense to say we should go back to doing what we were doing 10 years ago, because if we did that, our scores would be terrible today. I mean, we're, I think, making progress in terms of trying to adapt our curriculum and our methods and our ways of doing remediation to try to meet the standards as they change. And, I mean, one of the things for me is, I get that our test scores and rankings are important because people look at them from outside without really understanding them, but they look at the bottom line and they want one number that says, okay, which school should I go to, or which district should I move into? So we do have to pay attention to them. What's important for me is, what are we doing for every kid in our district? And are we doing what we really need to do to help every child achieve to the extent that they can, and to the extent that we can help them do that? That's what I use as part of my decision making as to what we should be doing in terms of making decisions.
Okay, any other comments from the board? So in closing, let me see if I can word this correctly, or do a good job wording this. We are the community too. We live in the community, we pay taxes like everyone else. We try to solicit as much input as possible. But the bottom line is, we then make the decisions. But we want the input. And so we're trying to do what we think is best. We have a very diverse board. Some of us have been on the board 18 years. My child is 30 years old. We have others whose daughter will be starting kindergarten next year. So we feel that we are diverse, and we try to listen to as many different groups as possible. We care. I can't say we care more than you, but being the president, I want us to always do what's right. We all want to do what we think is right. So, we want to work together to make, to continue to move this district forward. And we will continue to do that. We all care about Upper Dublin. If we're sitting here or sitting there, or sitting as teachers, or as administrators, or as parents, or as someone who had a child that graduated 30 years ago. We are all in this together. So we do care and we do wish to move, and I said this when we had the negotiations. We will get through this. I said this when we were looking at a principal at Fort Washington. The process will be followed. It will work out. So we have to follow the process. We have 2 more meetings left, I believe, with the scheduling, and then it will come to education. The committee meetings are more important than, shouldn't say this, but they are more important than the legislative meetings. There are some districts that Mr. Roos represents that has a legislative meeting that could be done in a half hour. But those are the meetings where we really do want to hear what you have to say. If you need to come back to the legislative meetings, we understand that, and we did not stop the community input. And we have another community input at the end of the meeting. So hopefully that, I don't know if I confused it or... Okay, anyway, moving on to number 6, announcements and communications. Ms. Bray, do we have any?
There are none this evening.
Okay. We have some minutes to approve.
Yes, if the board would be so kind as to approve the minutes from the March 16th Operations Committee, the March 16th Finance Committee, the March 27th Policy Committee, and also the March 27th Education Committee, and the April 3rd Legislative meeting. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of minutes to be approved.
Okay. May I have a motion, please? So moved. Mr. Chmielewski made the motion.
Second.
Is there a second? Okay. Any comments, questions, edits? We have time between now and those meetings that we look at the minutes. They will be available after they're approved in board docs. Seeing no comments or questions, all those in favor, please say aye. 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 Anyone opposed? Thank you. Moving on to education. Again, because we discussed these in committee, we should be able to move quickly through them, except if there's anything new. Dr. Ludwig?
Do you want to do this? I thought you wanted to do
I'm sorry.
one part
You're
of
correct.
finance.
Let us move. We want to move first to finance with Ms. Dr. Resnick. Just the one item regarding the budget.
Okay.
And Dr. Resnick,
Anybody need a recess?
just 15 minutes.
We were going to consider item number C under finance, proposed final budget. Finance Committee recommendations, recommended action, approving the 2017 to 2018 proposed final budget with budgeted expenditures of $99 million, $27,889, making the proposed final budget available for public inspection and advertising the intent to adopt the 2017-2018 final budget on June 14, 2017. And at this point, I would like to make a motion for a tax increase of 2.9%. I'm sorry, 2.19%.
2.19. Okay. The motion's made for 2.19. It was seconded by Ms. Good. Any additional comments? Okay. Seeing none.
Actually, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
Could somebody remind me? I know we would like to approve this unmodified on June 14th, but what are we allowed to do between now and then after we pass this one? After we pass this motion?
You can change it. You can go anywhere. You just can't go above 2.5.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Roos.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes.
Mr. Chmielewski?
If we started at a higher rate for voting, I think we would arrive at a unanimous decision, as opposed to if we start low, we could potentially not have a unanimous decision.
Well, the motion was made and it was seconded for 2.19.
I move 2.5.
You'd have to amend the motion?
Yes, I want to amend the motion.
Okay, we need a second to amend the motion. Would anybody would like to second? Shimeleski is moving it to 2.5. Is there a second? Seeing no second, we will go to 2.19. All those in...
I make a motion that we amend it to 2.39.
I'll second that one.
Okay, there was a second for 2.39. Okay, discussion of the amendment at this time. Now, clarification, if we do not approve the 2.39, we can go back to the 2.39. Yep. 2.19, but then also go back to the 239?
You can go, if the amendment fails, you're back to the 2.19. If that gets voted down, somebody can make a motion for anything they want.
Okay, so we had a first and a second for the 239. Okay, so we are voting now on 2.39. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those, I'm not going to be able to hear it. We're going to need a roll call. And this is for 239.
Let me just get my list up here. Dr. Ludwig.
No.
Mr. Sirota.
Speak up, please.
Mrs. Rothman.
No.
Mrs. Good. Dr. Kim. Mr. Shimeleski. Mrs. Hester. Dr. Resnick.
No.
Dr. Levinowitz.
No.
Could I make another amendment?
Wait, but the outcome of that is 2-7, that motion.
7 no. And
Correct. And
2
2 yeses.
yes.
Okay.
Could
We
I
are
propose a different amendment
amendment to the original motion.
to change the tax increase to 2.29.
Second.
Okay, 2.29. We have a first and a second. Sarah, who did the second?
Me, Sarah.
Okay, Sarah did the second. Thank you. Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call again. This is for 2.29.
Would you repeat who?
This is for 2.29.
Joan made the motion. Sarah made the
Joan?
second.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Dr. Levinowitz.
No.
Dr. Ludwig.
Yes.
Mr. Sirota. Mrs. Rothman.
Yes.
Mrs. Good. Mr. Kim. Mr. Shimeleski. Mrs. Hester. Dr. Resnick.
No.
Did I
Okay.
get everyone? 1, 2, 6
Okay,
yes.
6-3,
3.
that motion passes. The
Yeah.
motion's amended. Okay. Now the vote is on the 2.19? 2.29.
2.29.
Yeah.
No, it's-
So we have to vote again on 2.29. Okay, so we have a motion. The amendment was passed, so we are now looking at a 2.29 tax increase. We'll do another roll call. We have to do it again.
Who's making that motion?
Okay?
Someone.
Yeah, it's on the table
It's
because it passed.
the original motion.
No, the amended motion that passed at 2.29.
Okay. We're going to do a roll.
Yep.
Okay. Dr. Levinowitz.
Yes.
Dr. Ludwig.
Yes.
Mr. Sirota. Mrs. Rothman.
Yes.
Mrs. Good. Dr. Kim. Mrs. Hester. Mr. Shimeleski.
Dr. Resnick,
No.
Dr. Levinowitz.
Again?
Did you? Oh.
Let me go
Thank
first.
you. So the,
I get 2 votes.
yeah.
Right?
So it's 8 yes.
Okay,
8 to 1.
eight yeses. So at this point, we're at 2.29. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we're going back now to the Education Committee and Dr. Ludwig.
Okay, the Education Committee has one information item on enrollment. I'm going to take all the motions because all of them were discussed in the Education Committee. Motion B is for student activities. Motion C, D, E, and F regard professional development. And motion G is conferences.
Okay, nothing changed?
No.
There are a couple of additions to the conferences.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
That's what I thought. Okay. Okay. Motion is made. Is there a second? Second. Dr. Kim, second that motion. Okay. Any comments or questions on the Education Committee motions B through G? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, moving on to technology.
We have 3 motions, A, B, and C. These were discussed at the Education Committee meeting. Make a motion for all 3 of those.
Second.
Okay, first and second. Any comments or questions on the technology recommendations tonight? 3 items. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, moving on to people service recommendations. Dr. Kim.
Sure, there are 2 services agreements. The first is to authorize an agreement with MCIU to coordinate access billing process for the School District of Upper Dublin at a cost in the amount equal to 9% of the access dollars earned on behalf of the school district for the 2017-18 school year. The second is to authorize, and that's coming from the 2017-18 access budget. The second is to authorize approval to the MCIU for services contract cost plan in the amount not to exceed $300,000 for the 2017-18 school year. This is the annual contract for projected costs for school-age special education placements, supports, and services as prescribed by each student's IEP and services. This is coming out of the 2017-18 general fund. I'll also take the educational agreements as well, and there's 2 of them. The first is to authorize approval of a educational services agreement between the district and the parents of a special education student for reimbursement of compensatory education services for 2016-17 through July 2019 in the amount not to exceed $19,000. And again, just to keep in mind, that's from 2016 all the way through 2019 at that total amount. The second is to authorize approval of an educational services agreement between the district and the parents of a special education student for reimbursement of compensatory education services from the 2016-17 school years through September 2020 in the total amount not to exceed $50,000. And this is, again, coming from the budgets from 2016 all the way to the 2020 general fund.
Okay. Motion's made. Second?
Second.
Ms. Rothman, comments or questions? Motion made. There was a second. This is the service agreements and educational agreements in tonight's report. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Operations, Mr. Chmielewski, 3 items tonight.
There are 3 items before us this evening. The first is to approve the Cardinal Stadium Memorandum of Understanding between the school district and the outside users of Cardinal Stadium. The second is for the installation of a radio repeater system for our schools, and that's at a cost not to exceed $3,200. These 2 items were both discussed in a committee meeting. And the third is disposal and excess and obsolete and non-repairable equipment. Move approval on these 3 items.
Second, Mr. Sirota. Comments or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Finance Committee. Dr. Resnick, except for the budget.
We're discussing pages 10 through 16 in the packet, items A through M, excluding C, which we've already discussed, the proposed final budget. A is accepting the treasurer's report. B, the payments. Those are typically done every month. D is transfer to capital projects. E, discussed in the Finance Committee, the Forecast 5 analytics software agreement. F, an appraisal for 3610 Welsh Road. G, appraisal services for 1300 Virginia Drive. H, regarding a settlement stipulation for 1424 Dreshertown Road in the Dreshertown Plaza. I, a contract for audit services with Gorman and Associates. J, PlanCon K Financing Series 2017 General Obligation Bonds. K, PlanCon K Project Financing Series A through 2017 General Obligation Bonds. L is approving a $2,000 contribution from the district to the Upper Dublin Education Foundation for the 33rd Annual Upper Dublin Medal Ceremony and Reception. And M, approving the district's portion of the MCIU's membership services budget for 2017 to 2018.
Okay. Is there a second? Mr. Sirota made second. This is items A through M, excluding C. That was already approved. Comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Moving on to personnel. Ms. Good?
Can you hear me? Oh, all right. Sorry. I'd like to make a motion that we approve all personnel matters in A through G on the agenda, pages 16 through 19 on the packet.
Second?
Second.
Ms. Rothman, second. Okay, comments or questions? The entire personnel agenda tonight? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Moving on to policies. Second readings. Ms. Rothman?
Yep, so we have a second reading of Policy 204. We had no changes at the Policy Committee. We also have 3 administrative regulations for approval tonight. That's 202, 204, and 216.
Okay, is there a second? Ms. Hester, comments or questions?
I have a question. Sorry, I wasn't at the policy meeting, but it seems as though on Regulation 216, we've defined the word parent, and we give specifications for that, but later throughout the regulation, we tend to flip-flop, it seems. So we use guardian, et cetera, and things like that. So it seems like some of the wording is off on the regulation, that it wasn't completely cleaned up.
Okay, since it's a regulation, I believe we can just look at that again and adjust it. Thank you, Dr.
Yep.
Kim. Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay, seeing none, motion to approve the policy committee recommendations tonight. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Other business? Let's see. Mr. Chmielewski, would you like to handle the other business?
Oh, okay.
Since you looked at me, you never look at the board president when.
Sure. There's 2 items in other business. The first is the appointment of a board secretary. It's recommended that we reappoint Brenda Jones-Bray for board secretary for a 4-year term from July 1st, 2017 through June 30th of 2021.
Okay.
Move approval.
And want to do the other one?
Okay.
Did you read them both?
Okay, we'll do the second one too. The second one is the appointment of a board treasurer. It's recommended to reappoint Jennifer Baldessano as the board treasurer for 1-year term from July 1st, 2017 through June 30th of 2018.
Okay.
Second.
Second? Is that Ms. Good?
Yes.
Okay, and this is based on state code, state law? School code, yeah, that we do these. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Moving on to the liaison committee reports. Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, Mr. Chmielewski.
Okay, the MCIU board had a meeting on April the 26th. At that meeting, the MCIU Chief Financial Officer, Stan Whistler, it was announced that he won a PASBO award. It's like the the Super Bowl of PASBO for outstanding professional and personal achievement. It's called the Gary Reeser Memorial Award, and we're very happy to see that Stan Whistler, a fantastic guy and just a fabulous administrator at the IU for many years, won that award, and we were very happy to recognize him at the meeting. Our next MCIU meeting will be on May the 24th.
Okay, thank you, sir. Montgomery County Legislative Committee, Ms. Hester.
The most recent meeting was on the legislative breakfast on April 7th, which I did not attend, but I know that the board president and Dr. Wheeler did attend. And apparently the discussion there was around funding, charter schools, and apparently Madeline Dean was very much in favor of funding, of adequately funding the schools by tax increase.
Yep.
The next legislative meeting will be Wednesday, May 17th.
Okay, thank you. Eastern Center for Arts and Technology, we're starting to look at our enrollment numbers for next year, which look very good. No new programs, and we'll be meeting again on Wednesday evening. EAC, Education Advisory Committee, Dr. Ludwig.
The EAC met last Wednesday, I believe it was May 3rd. They elected officers for next year. The chair will be Faith Sachs, the vice chair will be Rob Rosenthal, and the secretary will be Michelle O'Toole.
Great people.
They are still working on some of the reports, but also the final meeting of the year will be June 7th. That will be a joint meeting with the board. And we're going to revive the tradition of having that include a joint meeting with dinner and starting the meeting at 7 and then with dinner and then 7:30 for the meeting. And I will send that out to people in email with reminders along the way.
Just want to encourage my colleagues to attend that meeting if at all possible. I think it's a good thing to show our support of the EAC. It does a great job. Moving on to PTA, PTO, Dr. Kim.
Yes, the PTO leadership meeting happened this past Wednesday. They discussed the use of board docs and regulations related to parent organizations. It was great. There's a lot of collaboration. In addition to that, all the PTOs are busy with just their end-of-year celebrations, so go out and support the work of the PTAs and PTOs. The Upper Dublin High School PTA is in need of parents serving on their board, and so if there's anyone interested in serving, it'd be great to get more parents involved. And just lastly, the Equity and Excellence Consortium will give a presentation of all their work at the end of the year as well. And Sandy Run as well is in need of volunteers as well, board members. Thank you.
Right. Right. We need help. We need community help. Township, Mr. Chmielewski.
I have no report.
Okay. Education Foundation, Ms. Good.
Just quickly wanted to say we had a great foundation day at George's Market last Wednesday. It went very well. Thank you to everyone who came. We meet on May 23rd again, and our next event in our busy spring are the medal ceremony on Wednesday the 17th.
Okay, thank you. Solicitor's report.
Announcing an executive session held for purposes of discussing personnel on last Monday, May 1st. Otherwise, that's all I have to say.
Okay, this is our second community input. Open it up now. Please step up to the microphone, name, and part of the community you reside in. Again, 4 minutes. Thank you.
Jen Kuznets, Fort Washington. I think I just touched something. It was just said that at the last education meeting that we didn't need extra staff to properly implement our TII, but then tonight we're talking about having to arrange and work on the elementary school schedules and possibly this second recess, I will say, in order to arrange the schedules to get the most out of our reading specialist with 1 T. So I want to make sure I heard it correctly. How many reading specialists do we have for the elementary schools? For the 4 elementary schools, how many do we have? Because we have 1,837 students in our elementary schools based off of the numbers that we got tonight. And I guess I don't know how many we have, but it sounds like we're sharing. One, or are we sharing two? I don't know how many we have. And then what percent of that 1,800 student number is in need of the reading specialist, or how many students need intervention? Because for me, it still seems like we need staff to implement this properly and provide the, the small group reading, the small group reading groups. I don't know how to say it. I'm not sure. But that's what it kind of seems like. And then one of the things we had suggested after the December meeting when we met with the curriculum office was to make a second recess mandatory, but let the schools at their discretion and the grade levels decide when they would take that. So I don't think that that's an unreasonable thing to ask, because at one elementary school where it's not mandatory, there are several teachers who are notorious for just never getting their kids out for a second time. And a lot of parents, through the petition, have discovered that their kids haven't been out really very much at all for second recess. So simply by just making 2 recesses mandatory, but at the discretion of the teacher, I think would solve a lot of the problems. We would be guaranteed that our kids would go out. We wouldn't be at the whim of the teacher if they felt like it, they didn't feel like it. And I think that that would solve a lot of the problems. And the reason why we're all here tonight, and I know that nothing has been presented officially to the board, but back in December when a draft schedule was leaked, or a working schedule, or whatever we're going to call it, there was no task force for elementary school recesses. Nothing was so it was simply something that was going on, and I feel like if the community hadn't come out, then a task force wouldn't have been formed. And so now and I don't know, maybe that's not true, but I know that the middle school had a task force for a very long time before things were even, were being shared, or I don't know. I don't know what the history of it is behind the scenes, but what it seems like is, had we not come out in December with our quote pitchforks, we wouldn't have had a task force. And so here we are again, and we've seen some draft schedules, and again, second recess is not making it onto that draft schedule. So that's where our concern comes from. And pretty much the board does not need to vote on it for this to be scheduled, so it can simply be implemented. So we want you to know how we feel. So it's not like I don't think we're jumping the gun. We want you to know how we feel about this draft schedule. That's pretty much why all the parents are out here and being outspoken. I guess that's it. So yeah, my big question is, how many reading specialists do we have, and how many students of those elementary students need that reading specialist?
Jenny Vitella, Ambler. Okay. I want to say that Fort Washington has had recess before lunch since the Del Calo days, so it's been a long time. And it is wonderful, and there has been research on that. It's awesome. Mark, I agree. Yes, we need to focus on education and keeping our property values well.
Clockbrook.
Yeah. Keeping our property values high. So that is all important. I agree that, yes, you have to serve all the community, and even the community that have children in the school want our property values to be good. So, and how the school is ranked does affect that. So it's all tied in and intermixed. We're all in this together, as you said. I think, Art, you bring up often how we should come to other meetings, and I do, of course, as you know. But I have to say that the 6 o'clock timeline versus 7 is a huge, huge issue. 6 o'clock is in the middle of all chaos with lots of parents, even me, and it's just crazy. Once the kids are settled and like an activity for the night, or the husband or the other parent is maybe home, it's a lot easier to get to a 7 o'clock meeting. So sometimes I can't make it an education or 6 o'clock meeting. I really want to emphasize that. I know it's really hard for me. And all this talk about the scores and all that, and yes, we know, because we come to these meetings, we know exactly what the scores entail. And that's okay. But the ranking of the school and what our school gets rated, with the exception of niche, it seems that Radnor, Tredyffrin Easton, and Lower Merion, which I reference often, those 3 schools, seem to have managed to figure it out and wade through the morass or whatever it is in order to still have, even though we're counting it differently and we're scoring it differently and it looks differently, seem to still be ranked high. So the question is, what are they doing to maintain their high rank that we are somehow unable to do when we were high? So I think that's what we need to look at what they're doing and figure it out. I don't have the answers. That's good. I guess I'm not on the board. Also, I want to talk about the flexible time for recess, and that is a concern. For example, let's say 5A is out on recess, but 5C is having a test, and our playground is right outside those windows. So that is why. And what if my child's best friend is in 5D, and the only time they get to see them is for 15 minutes on recess? It is a big deal, you know what I mean? And it is important that the grade levels, at a minimum, are kind of out together at the same time every day at a structured time, because easily you can eke into that time. So it's nice to know that at 2:15 every day, you can go out for 15 minutes and play with your kid, and you know you're not disrupting 5C because you're outside playing with 5A. And my other thing is, so I want to bring back the blue cards and the pink cards. So it sounds very not heterogeneous, except for the fact it's heterogeneous by sex only. Pink and blue. Is that what the pink and blue stands for? Because, and regardless, the personality is removed completely, and it's really upsetting. If I don't really understand how a room can be heterogeneous if we use pink and blue cards. And again, taking the personalities out of the kids, away from the kids and the teachers, and having that meeting is a huge. It's not on paper. It's just intrinsic. You feel it. It's different, and that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. I think I'm not the last one, but I didn't come up here to say anything more than thank you. There are a lot of people in your constituency, and I am one of them. We all have our demands, and we all have our expectations. We all have our preferences, and we all have our, I would say, the areas of focus that we focus more heavily on, and you have the brunt of it all. So I thank you for listening to us. I thank you for the opportunity to come and speak on behalf of the community. I don't represent any particular community. However, when in fact I speak, people think I represent the African American community at large. That is not the case. I am speaking on behalf of Melanie Butler, who lives right down the road and preparing to be home in the next 7 minutes. Sorry, guys, I'm leaving before you all. But I just want to say thank you very much. And not just thank you for listening to us, hearing from us, taking into account what it is we've expressed and or as concerns and or recommendations, but also for showing up. Every time I go to a school function, there is a presence from the board. So I just want to thank you, because as a volunteer and a person of service, there is very few times we can count the times that there's an expression of gratitude, of sincere gratitude. So I thank you for showing up and being present, so that when in fact we do address our concerns or we do express our concerns, that not only do you hear, but you show up to see. So thank you. That's it.
Veronica Lambert, Fort Washington. That should have been the final thing to say, because I agree with everything she said. My question is very, very quick. I know everyone's tired. I know I am. It's a long meeting. But it pertains to this community output. And coming here for the first time, or going to the educational meetings, having 3 minutes to talk and then sit down, and then having everyone else get 3 minutes and 3 minutes and 3 minutes.
4 minutes.
Or 4 more minutes and talk. And then having our questions answered at the end. And although I think you guys do a wonderful job in addressing them and addressing them sometimes even personally, I feel like we're removed from this conversation. I would much more appreciate having my questions answered right away. And I would think that would be easier for you as well, because you wouldn't have to think back to all the questions that were asked. And maybe my question would be asked and someone else wouldn't have to ask, or it would be answered and someone else wouldn't have to ask it after me. So I guess my question is, why is this in place in this way? Maybe it's to save time, but I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, community input has closed. We'll try to answer some of the questions. Dr. Miner, anything about RTII or the number of reading specialists?
Yes. The number of reading specialists varies by school and is in part prescribed by Title I status. And so this year we have 2 full-time reading specialists at Thomas Fitzwater, which is one of our Title I buildings. We have 1.8 in the form of 1 full-time and 2.4 reading specialists at Jarretttown Elementary School. We have 1.5 at Maple Glen and 1.5 at Fort Washington in terms of reading specialists. We will be making modifications to those allocations next year based on changes in Title I status. And we're looking at some other ways that we may be able to creatively schedule in terms of how many students, typically students who are in need of urgent intervention, who would be the students as we would classify needing direct support from the reading specialist, would be 5% of the total population. I was a social studies teacher, not a math teacher. I think that ends up being about 90 kids across the district. So we have somewhere in the range of 7.5 reading specialists to service those kids directly. So I feel like I'm not concerned about the ability to do that through the RTI model. In terms of the question about the schedule changes, again, I apologize if there was a lack of clarity. In the past, there was no specific attempt by principals when making a schedule to schedule intervention time separate from ELA time so that reading specialists would be available to provide push and support during language arts. So my comment there was about trying to be intentional so that we could maximize their expertise by using them in both intervention and in the core curriculum. As far as the recess being discretionary, Ms. Kuznets mentioned that if it was something that was mandatory but flexible in terms of the time, that may be something that would be meeting the needs of her as a parent and perhaps other parents. Right now, at the request of one of the parents on our committee, the draft schedules say teachers in grades 3, 4, and 5 may provide additional resource time at their discretion. Certainly, one of the things we could discuss is changing that language to read teachers in grades 3, 4, and 5 will provide additional resource time at their discretion each day. Again, that's something that we're very interested in discussing with parents, getting feedback on, and looking at modifications. Then, of course, Ms. Vitale had a different take on whether or not that would be functional in terms of some kids being out when other kids aren't. So I do look forward to the dialogue at the coffees. I think, as Dr. Wheeler and others have stated, it is challenging. There are competing demands and competing desires, and we want to listen to everybody and make the best possible schedule. But again, not everybody has the same opinion about what the best possible schedule looks like, so that's going to be challenging. And then to Ms. Kuznets's comment about whether or not there would have been a work group regarding the schedule, I don't know exactly how it would have played out. At the time, playing with drafts was, about getting teacher feedback at that point. I don't have a crystal ball either way. I do think, though, that all things considered, I'm glad that it went the way that it did, because I think that it has meant that the process has been extremely rich. And I'm very, very proud of the work the committee's doing in terms of taking feedback and constantly trying to change and make improvements in the interest of students. So sometimes when things get off to a bad start, that means they end up much better than where they would have otherwise. So I'm very hopeful that that will be the case.
And I would, going back to Ms. Kuznets' suggestion, I just want to say thank you, because I think something that's been lost in all of this discussion is the professional judgment of our teachers. And I think your suggestion paid attention to the importance of that, and I do appreciate that. Our teachers are professionals. They do have good judgment, and allowing that flexibility, I think, is one of the things that we've been doing. So thank you for bringing that up and bringing that piece back into the conversation. Much appreciated.
Okay. Mr. Roos will address the comment from Ms. Lambert, but does anybody else wish to
No.
Respond, Ms. Hester.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think her question was there a task force formed, and was the, oh, that's right, and that she had obtained a draft of the schedule. And I just want to comment, I believe that the committee was formed at that time, and that whatever was received or whatever they read was something that were notes from one of the original or one of the early meetings of that committee.
Just to clarify, at that point, we had invited teachers to participate to try to determine where they felt about different minute allocations and structures to the schedule. So at that point, it was a teacher-only group, and it was a first draft schedule with the intention of actually doing what we have done now, which is edit and re-edit and talk about ideas and change. But unfortunately, the very first draft with none of the edits and considerations and just teachers thinking about time for the first time is what ended up kind of sparking this entire process. So just to be clear, there was a group, but at the time it was a teacher-only group, and the intention was to just get teachers thinking about time differently. So it went down a different path, obviously.
I have a question for my own clarification. If there is a proposal for a schedule change, is that something that can be put forward solely by administration, or will it come to the board?
It would come to the board through the education committee.
Informationally, or?
Right. There would not be a motion, but we would, of course, accept any input from the education committee, which is how we also did the Sandy Run schedule recently.
Okay. So when so it would be at the education committee that the board would have any comments or questions, discussion,
Feedback,
etc.?
yes, that's correct. And I just want to reiterate that it was a week ago Friday, I had individual one-on-one meetings with each of the 4 elementary principals. And my question to them was, do you see the importance of moving forward with this now in light of what we need to do with response to intervention? Or is this something that could wait for another year? And each of the 4 of them emphatically stated that we need to move ahead with this. What that schedule looks like continues to be a matter of discussion as far as the question of recess. But implementing RTII and having some more attention to the blocks of time that we're devoting to the various content areas, the elementary principals are absolutely adamant that we do need to move forward with making those changes. And I want to emphasize one other thing. Not all breaks are recess, and recess is not the sum of the break time. I am in classrooms, and yes, we have a language arts block, but children are moving constantly and consistently throughout that time, as they are in mathematics and other content areas. So having a break, getting up and moving from one's desk is not restricted to recess time, and I think we need to recognize that as well.
Okay, any before we get to the last question, anything else from the board?
One quick one.
Sure.
Mrs. Vitella, sorry. I don't know why I did that. Mrs. Vitella was wrestling with the concept of heterogeneity via the pink and blue cards. I just want to make clear, and we can discuss it separately, that's not what we're proposing to do here. Mathematically speaking, statistically speaking, that does work, and we can explain why if you want to know.
Right.
But that's not what's being proposed here.
Correct. Okay, Mr. Roos, comment about the role, community.
Sure. First of all, I want to just emphasize this is a legislative meeting. The dialogue, the back and forth between the public and the board tends to happen at the committee meetings. It's much less formal that way. But this being a business meeting, it does need to have a structure. And as Mr. Levinowitz alluded, or Dr. Levinowitz alluded to, I represent other districts, I see the way it works. And anytime you have the questions being answered right after being asked, it stops being public comment and it becomes a untimed dialogue through whomever happens to be, talking at the time. By allowing everybody to ask their questions and making the list as to what the questions are, the questions are being answered much more thoroughly. They're being much more thoughtfully. They're being answered by the people that actually are in the best position to answer the questions. And this has worked the district very well, I think, for about at least the last 8 or 10 years that it's been doing it this way. Unlike in some other places where you see this, and then people get up and say, well, people answer their questions. They're like, well, I don't want this to count against my time, and then you get into a debate over whether you stop the clock or whatever. And this is just a much more structured process, which allows for much better information being sent out.
I'm not saying that we would do it, but there are some boards that will just listen to the community input and then move on. So it's just, so we would not, I think that's wrong. But the point is, if 8 or 10 people are going to address a similar issue, it's better to combine all those questions and answer it at one time. I think it works better. Okay, we are up to final comments from the board and superintendent. Dr. Wheeler, anything in closing?
No. I think we have spoken quite a bit tonight.
This is my physical activity in between with doing my curls. Any final comments from my colleagues on the board? Okay, let me just remind everyone that our upcoming committee meetings, operations, Thursday, May 18th at 6 p.m. We will, Ms. Vitale, we did not answer your question. We'll look at that over the summer and come back with that, starting it a little later. Okay, and then finance immediately following the operations. Policies, May 22nd. Education Committee, May 30th. Is that a Tuesday?
Yes, because of Memorial Day.
Right. I'm sorry, it says Tuesday. Okay. Okay, so because we're off on Monday, education will move on Tuesday. Next legislative meeting will be Monday, June 5th. At that time, it's with great honor that we will approve the graduating class. One of the highlights. And that is all the committee. That is announcing all the meetings. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Second. Okay. Joe and Mark. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Anyone opposed? I'll shoot you. Okay. Okay, thank you, and thank you for coming tonight, ladies and gentlemen.